I read books sometimes. Ain't that something? Ain't that crazy? Hello, hi. I'm the book reading guy. Sometimes. Hi, it's been like a month since I actually read books because of all of the Archie business. But finally I'm back. I'm back for the what's it now? For Good Omens. Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. It is another funny book. It's a comedy book of some sort. Comedy, spooky? Not really spooky, but it's about the Antichrist or something. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't really read that much about it, because that's just how I deal with things, I suppose. Is book good, receive good? Yes, okay, I read. That's essentially my my deal with that. That's my deal with that. Let me just post this something here. Let's pin that. Okay. Let me just fire up my reading music, and I shall read the book. Yes. Normal music, turn off. Turn off, I say. Turn off. There you go. Nice music for reading. Loop. Desktop audio on. Douche. Douche. There you go. It's not playing. It's not picking up. Ah, yeah. Hold on. You gotta begin a thing with scuff, can't you? You gotta do it. And where is that source? Properties. Device. Okay. There it goes. Congratulations, I've done it. Let me just get my book. Where is it? Over there. So I will be reading this today and tomorrow. So it is possible that I will get through both of the the entire book in these 2 streams. I'm not gonna push it for it, that much, but I'll try and see how far I get in today, because I don't want to spend a month reading a short book, Let's see, let's just flip on over to Good Omens, the nice and accurate prophecies of Agnes Nutter Witch. Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman wrote this book. Caveat. Kids, bringing about Armageddon can be dangerous. Do not attempt it in your own home, says the book. There's a foreword. Let's see. I don't think I wanna read the foreword. I don't care. In the beginning, it was a nice day. All the days had been nice. There had been rather more than 7 of them so far, and rain hadn't been invented yet. But clouds massing east of Eden suggested that the first thunderstorm was on its way, and it was going to be a big one. The angel of the eastern gate put his wings over his head to shield himself from the first drops. "I'm sorry," he said politely. "What was it you were saying?" "I said that one went down like a lead balloon," said the serpent. "Oh, yes," said the angel, whose name was Aziraphale. "I think it was a bit of an overreaction, to be honest," said the serpent. "I mean, first offense and everything. I can't see what's so bad about knowing the difference between good and evil anyway." "It must be bad," reasoned Aziraphale, in the slightly concerned tones of one who can't see it either, and is worrying about it. "Otherwise you wouldn't have been involved." "They just said, 'Get up there and make some trouble,'" said the serpent, whose name was Crawley, although he was thinking of changing it now. Crawley, he decided, was not him. Yes, but you're a demon. I'm not sure if it's actually possible for you to do good, said Aziraphale. It's down to your basic, nature. Nothing personal, you understand. You've got to admit it's a bit of a pantomime, though, said Crawley. I mean, pointing out the tree and saying, "Don't touch," in big letters. Not very subtle, is it? I mean, why not put it on top of a high mountain or a long way off? Makes you wonder what he's really planning. Best not to speculate, really, said Aziraphale. You can't second-guess ineffability, I always say. There's right and there's wrong. If you do wrong, when you're told to do right, you deserve to be punished. They sat in an embarrassed silence, watching the raindrops bruise the first flowers. Eventually, Crawley said, "Didn't you have a flaming sword?" Said the angel. A guilty expression passed across his face, and then came back and camped there. "You did, didn't you?" said Crawley. "It flamed like anything." Well, it looked very impressive, I thought." "Yes, but, well, lost it, have you?" "Oh, no, not exactly lost, more." "Well?" Aziraphale looked wretched. "If you must know," he said, a trifle testily, "I gave it away." Crawley stared up at him. "Well, I had to," said the angel, rubbing his hands distractedly. "They looked so cold, poor things. And she's expecting already. And what with the vicious animals out there and the storm coming up, I thought, well, where's the harm? So I just said, look, if you come back, there's going to be an almighty row, but if you might be needing the sword, so here it is. Don't bother to thank me, just do everyone a big favor and don't let the sun go down on you here." He gave Crawley a worried grin. "That was the best course, wasn't it?" "I'm not sure it's actually possible for you to do evil," said Crawley sarcastically. Aziraphale didn't notice the tone. "Oh, I do hope so," he said. "I really do hope so. It's been worrying me all afternoon." They watched the rain for a while. "Funny thing is," said Crawley, "I keep wondering whether the apple thing wasn't the right thing to do as well. A demon can get into real trouble doing the right thing." He nudged the angel. "Funny if we both got it wrong, eh? Funny if I did the good thing and you did the bad one, eh?" "Not really," said Aziraphale. Crawley looked at the rain. "No," he said, sobering up. "I suppose not." Slate-black curtains stumbled over Eden. Thunder growled amongst the hills. The animals, freshly named, cowered from the storm. Far away in the dripping woods, something bright and fiery flickered among the trees. It was going to be a dark and stormy night. Let me just clear my mouth a bit. And the chapter is a very short chapter. Hi, Minnie. Hello, Bright Marble. Right. That was the prologue, I suppose. Oh, it's like a play, kinda. It's got all these characters listed out here. Hold on. Let us continue. Good Omens. A narrative of certain events occurring in the last 11 years of human history in strict accordance as shall be shown with The Nice and Accurate Prophecies of Agnes Nutter, compiled and edited with footnotes of an educational nature and precepts for the wise by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. Dramatis Personae, supernatural beings. God, Metatron, the voice of God. Aziraphale, an angel, and part-time rare book dealer. Satan, a fallen angel, the adversary. Beelzebub, a likewise fallen angel and prince of hell. Hastur, a fallen angel and duke of hell. Ligur, likewise a fallen angel and duke of hell. Crawley, an angel who do not so much fall as saunter vaguely downwards. Apocalyptic horse persons. Death, war, famine, pollution. Humans. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Pulsifier, a witch finder. Agnes Nutter, a prophetess. Newton Pulsifier. Pulsifer, wages clerk and witchfinder private. Anathema device, practical occultist and professional descendant. Shadwell, witchfinder sergeant. Madame Tracy, painted Jezebel, mornings only, Thursdays by arrangement, and medium. Sister Mary Loquacious, a satanic nun of the Chattering Order of St. Beryl. Mr. Young, a father. Mr. Tyler, a chairman of a residents' association, and a delivery man. Them, Adam, an antichrist. Pepper, a girl. Wensleydale, a boy. Brian, a boy. Full chorus of Tibetans, aliens, Americans, Atlanteans, and other rare and strange creatures of the last days. And dog. Satanical hellhound and cat warrior. Those are all the characters. And dog. 11 years ago. Current theories on the creation of the universe state that, if it were created at all and didn't just start, as it were, unofficially, it came into being between 10 and 20,000 million years ago. By the same token, the Earth itself is generally supposed to be about 4,500 million years old. These dates are incorrect. Medieval Jewish scholars put the date of the creation at 3760 BC. Greek Orthodox theologians put creation as far back as 5508 BC. These suggestions are also incorrect. Archbishop James Ussher, 1580 to 1656, published Annales Veteris et Novi Testamenti in 1654, which suggested that the heaven and earth were created in 4004 BC. One of his aides took the calculation further and was able to announce triumphantly that the Earth was created on Sunday the 21st of October, 4004 BC, at exactly 9 a.m., because God liked to get work done early in the morning while he was feeling fresh. This too was incorrect, by almost a quarter of an hour. The whole business with the fossilized dinosaur skeletons was a joke the paleontologists haven't seen yet. This proves two things. Firstly, that God moves in extremely mysterious, not to say circuitous ways. God does not play dice with the universe. He plays an ineffable game of his own devising, which might be compared, from the perspective of any of the other players, to being involved in an obscure and complex version of poker in a pitch-dark room with blank cards for infinite stakes, with a dealer who won't tell you the rules and who smiles all the time. Secondly, the Ursa Libra. The astrological prediction for Libra in the Your Star City column of the Tadfield Advertiser on the day this history begins read as follows. Libra, 24th of September to 23rd of October. You may be feeling run down and always in the same old daily round. Home and family matters are highlighted and are hanging fire. Avoid unnecessary risks. A friend is important to you. Shelve major decisions until the way ahead seems clear. You may be vulnerable to a stomach upset today, so avoid salads. Help could come from an unexpected quarter. This was perfectly correct on every count except for the bit about salads. It wasn't a dark and stormy night. It should have been, but that's what the weather for you. For every mad scientist who's had a convenient thunderstorm just on the night of his great work is finished and lying on the slab, there have been dozens who've sat around aimlessly under the peaceful stars while Igor clocks up the overtime. But don't let the fog, with rain later, temperatures dropping to around 45 degrees, give anyone a false sense of security. Just because it's a mild night doesn't mean that dark forces aren't abroad. They're abroad all the time. They're everywhere. They always are. That's the whole point. Two of them lurked in the ruined graveyard. Two shadowy figures, one hunched and squat, the other lean and menacing. Both of them Olympic-grade lurkers. If Bruce Springsteen had ever recorded Born to Lurk, these two would have been on the album cover. They had been lurking in the fog for an hour now, but they had been pacing themselves and could lurk for the rest of the night if necessary, with still enough sullen menace left for a final burst of lurking around dawn. Finally, after another 20 minutes, one of them said, "Bugger this for a lark. They should have been here hours ago." The speaker's name was Hastur. He was a Duke of Hell. Many phenomena, wars, plagues, sudden audits, have been advanced as evidence for the hidden hand of Satan in the affairs of man. But whenever students of demonology get together, the M25 London Orbital Motorway is generally agreed to be among the top contenders for Exhibit A. Where they go wrong, of course, is assuming that the wretched road is evil simply because of the incredible carnage and frustration it engenders every day. In fact, very few people on the face of the planet know that the very shape of the M25 forms the sigil Odegra in the language of the black priesthood of ancient Mu, and it means, "Hail the great beast, devourer of worlds." The thousands of motorists who daily fume their way around its serpentine lengths have the same effect as water on a prayer wheel, grinding out an endless fog of low-grade evil to pollute the metaphysical atmosphere for scores of miles around. It was one of Crowley's better achievements. It had taken years to achieve and had involved 3 computer hacks, 2 break-ins, 1 minor bribery, and, on one wet night when all else had failed, 2 hours in a squelchy field shifting the marker pegs a few but occultly incredible significantly meters. When Crowley had watched the first 30-mile-long tailback, he'd experienced the lovely warm feeling of a bad job well done. It had earned him a commendation. Crowley was currently doing 110 miles per hour somewhere east of Slough. Nothing about him looked particularly demonic, at least by classical standards. No horns, no wings. Admittedly, he was listening to a Best of Queen tape, but no conclusions should be drawn from this because all tapes left in the car for more than about a fortnight metamorphosed into Best of Queen albums. No particularly demonic thoughts were going through his head. In fact, he was currently wondering vaguely who Moe and Chandon were. Crowley had dark hair and good cheekbones, and he was wearing snakeskin shoes. Or at least presumably he was wearing shoes, and he could do really weird things with his tongue. And whenever he forgot himself, he had a tendency to hiss. He also didn't blink much. The car he was driving was a 1926 black Bentley. One owner from New, and that owner had been Crowley. He'd looked after it. The reason he was late was that he was enjoying the 20th century immensely. It was much better than the 17th, and a lot better than the 14th. One of the nice things about time, Crowley always said, was that it all was steadily taking him further away from the 14th century. The most bloody boring 100 years on God's, excuse his French, earth. The 20th century was anything but boring. In fact, a flashing blue light in his rear-view mirror had been telling Crowley for the last 50 seconds that he was being followed by 2 men who would like to make it even more interesting for him. He glanced at his watch, which was designed for the kind of rich deep-sea diver who likes to know what time it is in 21 world capitals while he's down there. The Bentley thundered up the exit ramp, took the corner on 2 wheels, and plunged down a leafy road. The blue light followed. Crowley sighed, took one hand from the wheel, and, half-turning, made a complicated gesture over his shoulder. The flashing light dimmed into the distance as a police car rolled to a halt, much to the amazement of its occupants. But it would be nothing to the amazement they'd experienced when they opened the bonnet and found out what the engine had turned into. In the graveyard, Hastur, the tall demon, passed a dog-end back to Ligur, the shorter one and more accomplished lurker. "I can see a light," he said. "Here he comes now, the flash bastard." "What's that he drivin'?" said Ligur. "It's a car. A horseless carriage," explained Hastur. "I expect they didn't have them last time you was here. Not for what you might call general use." "They had a man at the front with a red flag," said Ligur. "They've come on a bit since then, I reckon." "What's this Crowley like?" said Ligur. Hastur spat. "He's been up here too long," he said. "Right from the start, gone native, if you ask me. Drives a car with a telephone in it." Ligur pondered this. Like most demons, he had a very limited grasp of technology, and so he was just about to say something like, "I bet it needs a lot of wire," when the Bentley rolled to a halt at the cemetery gate. "And he wears sunglasses," sneered Hastur. "Even when you don't need to. He raised his voice. "All hail Satan," he said. "All hail Satan," Ligor echoed. "Hi," said Crowley, giving them a little wave. "Sorry I'm late, but you know how it is on the A40 at Denham. And then I tried to cut upwards toward Corley Wood, and then—" "Now we are all here," said Hastur meaningfully. "We must recount the deeds of the day." "Yeah, deeds," said Crowley, with a slightly guilty look of one who is attending church for the first time in years and has forgotten which bits you stand up for. Hastur cleared his throat. "I have tempted the priest," he said. "As he walked down the street and saw the pretty girls in the sun, I put doubt in his mind. He would have been a saint, but within a decade we shall have him." "Nice one," said Crowley, helpfully. "I have corrupted a politician," said Ligor. "Let him think a tiny bribe would not hurt. Within a year we shall have him." They both looked expectantly at Crowley, who gave them a big smile. "You'll like this," he said. His smile became even wider and more conspiratorial. "I tied up every portable telephone system in central London for 45 minutes at lunchtime," he said. There was silence, except for the distant swishing of cars. "Yes?" said Hastur. "And then what?" "Look, it wasn't easy," said Crowley. "That's all?" said Ligor. "Look, people." "And exactly what has that done to secure souls for our master?" said Hastur. Crowley pulled himself together. What could he tell them? That 20,000 people got bloody furious? That you could hear the arteries clanging shut all across the city? And that they went back and took it out on their secretaries or traffic wardens or whatever? And they took it out on other people? In all kinds of vindictive little ways which, and here was the good bit, they thought up themselves. For the rest of the day, the knock-on effects were incalculable. Thousands and thousands of souls all got a faint patina of tarnish, and you hardly had to lift a finger. But you couldn't tell that to demons like Hastur and Ligor. 14th century minds, a lot of them. Spending years picking away at one soul. Admittedly, it was craftsmanship, but you had to think differently these days. Not big, but wide. With 5 billion people in the world, you couldn't pick the buggers off one by one anymore. You had to spread your effort. But demons like Ligor and Hastur wouldn't understand. They'd never have thought up Welsh language television, for example, or value-added tax, or Manchester. He'd been particularly pleased with Manchester. The powers that be seemed to be satisfied, he said. Times are changing, so what's up? Hastur reached down behind the tombstone. "This is," he said. Crowley stared at the basket. "Oh," he said. "No." "Yes," said Hastur, grinning. "Already?" "Yes." "And, it's up to me too?" "Yes." Hastur was enjoying this. Why me?" said Crowley desperately. "You know me, Hastur. This isn't, my scene." "Oh, it is. It is," said Hastur. "Your scene. Your starring role. Take it. Times are changing." "Yeah," said Ligor, grinning. "They're coming to an end for a start." "Why me?" "You're obviously highly favored," said Hastur maliciously. "I imagine Ligor here would give his right arm for a chance like this." "That's right," said Ligor. "Someone's right arm anyway," he thought. There were plenty of right arms around. No sense in wasting a good one. Hastur produced a clipboard from the grubby recesses of his Mac. "Sign here," he said, leaving a terrible pause between the words. Crowley fumbled vaguely in an inside pocket and produced a pen. It was sleek and matte black. It looked as though it could exceed the speed limit. "It's a nice pen," said Ligor. "It can write underwater," Crowley muttered. "Whatever will they think of next?" mused Ligor. "Whatever it is, they better think of it quickly," said Hastur. "No, not A.J. Crowley. Your real name." Crowley nodded mournfully and drew a complex wiggly sigil on the paper. It glowed redly in the gloom, just for a moment, and then faded. "What am I supposed to do with it?" he said. "You will receive instructions." Hastur scowled. "Why so worried, Crowley?" The moment we have been working for all these centuries is at hand. Yeah, right, said Crowley. He did not look. Now, like the light figure that had sprung so lightly from the Bentley a few minutes ago. He had a haunted expression. Our moment of eternal triumph awaits. Eternal, yeah, said Crowley. And you will be a tool of that glorious destiny. Tool, yeah, muttered Crowley. He picked up the basket as if it might explode, which, in a manner of speaking, it would shortly do. Okay, he said. I'll, be off then, shall I? Get it over with. Not that I want to get it over with, he added hurriedly, aware of the things that could happen if Hastur turned in an unfavorable report. But you know me, keen. The senior demons did not speak. So, I'll be popping along, Crowley babbled. See you guys, great, fine, ciao. As the Bentley skidded off into the darkness, Ligor said, What's that mean? It's Italian, said Hastur. I think it means food. Funny thing to say then. Ligor stared at the retreating taillights. You trust him? He said. No, said Hastur. Right, said Ligor. It would be a funny old world, he reflected, if demons went round trusting one another. Crowley, somewhere west of Amersham, hurtled through the night, snatched a tape at random and tried to wrestle it out of its brittle plastic box while staying on the road. The glare of a headlight proclaimed it to be Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Soothing music, that's what he needed. He rammed it into the Blaupunkt. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, shit! Why now? Why me? He muttered, as the familiar strains of Queen washed over him. And suddenly Freddie Mercury was speaking to him. Because you earned it, Crowley. Crowley blessed under his breath. Using electronics as a means of... Wait, Crowley blessed under his breath. Alright. Using electronics as a means of communication had been his idea. And... Below had for once taken it up and, as usual, got it dead wrong. He'd hoped they could be persuaded to subscribe to Cellnet, but instead he just cut it into whatever it happened to be that he was listening to at the time and twisted it. Crowley gulped. Thank you very much, Lord, he said. We have great faith in you, Crowley. Thank you, Lord. This is important, Crowley. I know. This is the big one, Crowley. Leave it to me, Lord. This is what we are doing, Crowley, and if it goes wrong, then those involved will suffer greatly. Even you, Crowley. Especially you. Understood, Lord. Here are your instructions, Crowley. And suddenly he knew. He hated that. They could just as easily have told him. They didn't suddenly have to drop chilly knowledge straight into his brain. He had to drive to a certain hospital. I'll be there in 5 minutes, Lord. No problem. Good. I see a little silhouette of a man. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Crowley thumped the wheel. Everything had been going so well. It had really under his thumb these few centuries. That's how it goes. You think you're on top of the world, and suddenly they spring Armageddon on you. The Great War, the last battle, heaven versus hell. 3 rounds, 1 fall, no submission. And that would be that. No more world. That's what the end of the world meant. No more world. Just endless heaven, or depending on who won, endless hell. Crowley didn't know which was worse. Well, hell was worse, of course, by definition, but Crowley remembered what heaven was like, and it had quite a few things in common with hell. You couldn't get a decent drink in either of them, for a start. And the boredom you got in heaven was almost as bad as the excitement you got in hell. But there was no getting out of it. You couldn't be a demon and have free will. I will not let you go. Let him go. Well, at least it wouldn't be this year. You'd have time to do things. Unload long-term stocks for a start. He wondered what would happen if he just stopped the car here on this dark and damp and empty road. and took the basket and swung it round and round and let go and... something dreadful, that's what. He'd been an angel once. He hadn't meant to fall. He just hung around the wrong people. The Bentley plunged on through the darkness, its fuel gauge pointing to 0. It had pointed to 0 for more than 60 years now. It wasn't all bad being a demon. You didn't have to buy petrol for one thing. The only time Crowley had bought petrol was once in 1967 to get the free James Bond bullet hole in the windscreen transfers, which he rather fancied at the time. On the back seat, the thing in the basket began to cry, the air raid siren wail of the newly born. High, wordless, and old. Let's take a short break because I need to like recompose myself. Man, what the hell? Why they make like just randomly insert the song lyrics in there? It's great. I like to imagine it's just like Freddie Mercury himself talked through the radio. That's what it sounds like. Or I suppose the tape started singing Satan's instructions to him in the voice of Freddie Mercury. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Man. Hey Squid, how you doing? It seemed funny, Squid, and it seems like it will continue to be funny to me, because I've only read a few pages so far and it's been great. Well, maybe you won't have to read it now, because I'm reading it. Or you could get it yourself and read it. Who knows? Archibald. Meow meow. Archibald has been terrorizing a little bit. He's been trying to knock over my trash can. I think he wants to go out, so I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna let him out. Archie, wanna leave? Go? Wanna go? No? Not anymore? Okay. No. He doesn't want to leave anymore, the Archibald. He was just terrorizing me for no reason. Weren't you, Archibald? Doof. Also, hello Eisenheim as well, and hello Shalab there. Hypnotic and Extreme Marbles. Wow, I don't think anybody's gotten Extreme so far. Ain't that something? How you doing, Archie? Oh, baby. I see you had a little nibble of your food. Good job, Archie. Okay, let us continue for another 40 minutes or so until Archibald has to eat. It was quite a nice hospital, thought Mr. Young. It would have been quiet too if it wasn't for the nuns. He quite liked nuns. Not that he was a, left-footer or anything like that. No, when it came to avoiding the church he stolidly avoided going to was St. Cecil and All Angels. No nonsense, C of E. And he wouldn't have dreamed of avoiding going to any other. All the others had the wrong smell. Floor polish for the low, somewhat suspicious incense for the high. Deep in the leather armchair of his soul, Mr. Young knew that God got embarrassed at that sort of thing. But he liked seeing nuns around, in the same way that he liked seeing the Salvation Army. It made you feel that it was all right. People somewhere were keeping the world on its axis. This was his first experience of the Chattering Order of St. Beryl, however. Deirdre had run across them while being involved in one of her causes. Possibly the one involving lots of unpleasant South Americans fighting other unpleasant South Americans and the priests egging them on instead of getting on with properly priestly concerns like organizing the church cleaning Rara. The point was, nuns should be quiet. They were the right shape for it, like those pointed things you got in those chambers Mr. Young was vaguely aware of Hi-Fi got tested in. They shouldn't be, chattering all the time. He filled his pipe with tobacco. Well, they called it tobacco. It wasn't what he thought of as tobacco. It wasn't the tobacco you used to get, and wondered reflectively what would happen if you asked a nun where the Gens was. Probably the Pope sent you a sharp note or something. He sniffed his position awkwardly and glanced at his watch. One thing, though. At least the nuns had put their foot down about him being present at the birth. Deirdre had been all for it. She'd been reading things again. One kid already, and suddenly she's declaring that this confinement was going to be the most joyous and sharing experience two human beings could have. That's what came of letting her order her own newspapers. Mr. Young distrusted papers whose inner pages had names like lifestyle or options. Well, he hadn't got anything against joyous sharing experiences. Joyous sharing experiences were fine by him. The world probably needed more joyous sharing experiences. But he had made it abundantly clear that this was one joyous shared experience Deirdre could have by herself. And the nuns had agreed. They saw no reason for the father to be involved in the proceedings. When you thought about it, Mr. Young mused, they probably saw no reason why the father should be involved anywhere. He finished thumbing the so-called tobacco into the pipe and glared at the little sign on the wall of the waiting room that said, for his own comfort, he would not smoke. For his own comfort, he decided, he'd go and stand in the porch. If there was a discreet shrubbery for his own comfort out there, so much the better. He wandered down the empty corridors and found the doorway that led out to an rain-swept courtyard full of Rauch's dustbins. He shivered and cupped his hands to light his pipe. It happened to them at a certain age. Wives, 25 Blenny's years, then suddenly they were going off and doing these robotic exercises in pink socks with their feet cut out, and they started blaming you for never having had to work for a living. It was hormones or something. Alright. A large black car skidded to a halt by the dustbins. A young man in dark glasses leaped out into the drizzle, holding what looked like a carry cot, and snaked toward the entrance. Mr. Young took his pipe out of his mouth. "You've left your lights on," he said helpfully. The man gave him the blank look of someone to whom lights are the least of his worries and waved a hand vaguely toward the Bentley. The lights went out. "That's handy," said Mr. Young. "Infrared, is it?" He was mildly surprised to see that the man did not appear to be wet, and that the carry cot appeared to be occupied. "Has it started it yet?" Said the man. Mr. Young felt vaguely proud to be so instantly recognizable as a parent. "Yes," he said. "They made me go out," he added thankfully. "Already? Any idea how long we got?" "We," Mr. Young noted. Obviously, a doctor with views about co-parenting. "I think we were, getting on with it," said Mr. Young. "What room is she in?" said the man hurriedly. "We're in room 3, said Mr. Young. He patted his pockets and found the battered packet, which, in accord with tradition, he had brought with him. "Would we care to share a joyous cigar experience?" he said. But the man had gone. Mr. Young carefully placed the packet and looked reflectively at his pipe. Always in a rush, these doctors, working all the hours God sent. There's a trick they do with 1 pea and 3 cups, which is very hard to follow. And something like it for greater stakes than a handful of loose change is about to take place. The text will be slowed down to allow the sleight of hand to be followed. Mr. Deirdre Young is giving birth in delivery room 3. She's having a golden-haired male baby we will call Baby A. The wife of the American Cultural Attaché, Miss Harriet Dowling, is giving birth in delivery room 4. She's having a golden-haired male baby we will call Baby B. Sister Mary Locacious has been a devout Satanist since birth. She went to Sabbat school as a child and won black stars for handwriting and liver. When she was told to join the Chattering Order, she went obediently, having a natural talent in that direction and, in any case, knowing that she would be among friends. She would be quite bright, if she was ever put in a position to find out, but long ago found that being a scatterbrain, as she'd put it, gave you an easier journey through life. Currently, she's being handed a golden-haired male baby we will call the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. Watch carefully. Round and round they go. Is that him? Said Sister Mary, staring at the baby. Only I'd expected funny eyes, red or green, or teensy-weensy little hoofykins, or a whittle tail. She turned him around as she spoke. No horns either. The devil's child looked ominously normal. Yes, that's him, said Crowley. Fancy me holding the Antichrist, said Sister Mary, and bathing the Antichrist, and counting his little toesy-woesies. She was now addressing the child directly, lost in some world of her own. Crowley waved a hand in front of her wimple. Hello? Hello? Sister Mary? Sorry, sir, he's a little sweetheart, though. Does he look like his daddy? I bet he does. Does he look like his daddy Waddykins? No, said Crowley firmly. And now I should get up to the delivery rooms, if I were you. Will he remember me when he grows up, do you think? Said Sister Mary wistfully, sidling slowly down the corridor. Pray that he doesn't, said Crowley, and fled. Sister Mary headed through the nighttime hospital with the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness, safely in her arms. She found a bassinet and laid him down in it. He gurgled. She gave him a tickle. A matronly head appeared around the door. It said, Sister Mary, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be on duty in room 4? Master Crowley said, Just glide along. There's a good nun. Have you seen the husband anywhere? He's not in the waiting room. I've only seen Master Crowley, and he told me... I'm sure he did, said Sister Grace voluble firmly. I suppose I'd better go look for the wretched man. Come in and keep an eye on her, will ya? She's a bit woozy, but the baby's fine. Sister Grace paused. Why are you winking? Is there something wrong with your eye? You know, Sister Mary hissed darkly. The babies, the exchange. Of course, in good time. But we can't have the father wandering around, can we? Said Sister Grace. No telling what he might see. So just wait here and mind the baby. There's a dear. She sailed off down the polished corridor. Sister Mary, wheeling her bassinet, entered the delivery room. Miss Young was more than woozy. She was fast asleep. Or Mrs. Young, I guess. With the look of determined self-satisfaction of someone who knows that other people are going to have to do the running around for once. Baby A was asleep beside her, weighed and name-tagged. Sister Mary, who had been brought up to be helpful, removed the name tag, copied it out, and attached the duplicate to the baby in her care. The babies looked similar, both being small, blotchy, and looking sort of, though not really, like Winston Churchill. Now, thought Sister Mary, I could do with a nice cup of tea. Most of the members of the convent were old-fashioned Satanists, like their parents and grandparents before them. They'd been brought up to it, and weren't, when you got right down to it, particularly evil. Human beings mostly aren't. They just get carried away by new ideas, like dressing up in jackboots and shooting people, or dressing up in white sheets and lynching people, or dressing up in tie-dye jeans and playing guitars at people. Offer people a new creed with a costume and their hearts and minds will follow. Anyway, being brought up as a Satanist tended to take the edge of it. It was something you did on Saturday nights, and the rest of the time you simply got on with life as best you could, just like everyone else. Besides, Sister Mary was a nurse, and nurses, whatever their creed, are primarily nurses, which had a lot to do with wearing your watch upside down, keeping calm in emergencies, and dying for a cup of tea. She hoped someone would come soon. She'd done the important bit, now she wanted her tea. It may help to understand human affairs to be clear that most of the great triumphs and tragedies of history are caused not by people being fundamentally good or fundamentally bad, but by people being fundamentally people. Mhm. There was a knock on the door. She opened it. Has it happened yet? Asked Mr. Young. I'm the father. The husband. Whatever. Both. Sister Mary had expected the American cultural attaché to look like Blake Clarington or J.R. Ewing. Mr. Young didn't look like any American she'd ever seen on television, except possibly for a avuncular sheriff in the better class of murder mystery. He was something of a disappointment. She didn't think much of his cardigan either. She swallowed her disappointment. Oh, yes, she said. Congratulations. Your lady wife's asleep. Poor pet. Mr. Young looked over her shoulder. Twins? He said. He reached for his pipe. He stopped reaching for his pipe. He reached for it again. Twins? No one said anything about twins. Oh, no, said Sister Mary hurriedly. This one's yours. The other one's, someone else's. Just looking after him till Sister Grace gets back. No, she reiterated, pointing to the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of bottomless pit, Grace be that is called dragon, prince of this world, fall of father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. This one's definitely yours. From the top of his head to the tip of his hoofy woofies. Which he hasn't got, she added, hastily. Mr. Young peered down. Ah, yes, he said doubtfully. He looks like my side of the family. All, present and correct, is he? Oh, yes, said Sister Mary. He's a very normal child, she added. Very, very normal. There was a pause. They stared at the sleeping baby. You don't have much of an accent, said Sister Mary. Have you been over here long? About 10 years, said Mr. Young, mildly puzzled. The job moved, you see, and I had to move with it. It must be a very exciting job. I've always thought, said Sister Mary. Mr. Young looked gratified. Not everyone appreciated the more stimulating aspects of cost accountancy. I expect it was very different where you were before, Sister Mary went on. I suppose so, said Mr. Young, who'd never really thought about it. Lutton, as far as he could remember, was pretty much like Tadfield. The same sort of hedges between your house and the railway station. The same sort of people. Taller buildings, for one thing, said Sister Mary, desperately. Mr. Young stared at her. The only one he could think of was the Alliance and Leicester offices. And I expect you got a lot of garden parties, said the nun. Ah, he was on firmer ground here. Deirdre was very keen on that sort of thing. Oh, lots, he said, with feeling. Deirdre makes jam for them, you know, and they normally have to help with the white elephant. This one is an aspect of Buckingham Palace society that had never occurred to Sister Mary. Although the pachyderm fitted right in. I expect they're the tribute, she said. I read where these foreign potentates give her all sort of things. I'm sorry? I'm a big fan of the royal family, you know. Oh, so am I, said Mr. Young, leaping gratefully onto his new eyes flow in the bewildering stream of consciousness. Yes, you knew where you were with the royals, the proper ones, of course, who pulled their weight in the hand-waving and bridge-opening department, not the ones who went to discos all night long and were sick all over the paparazzi. That's nice, said Sister Mary. I thought you people weren't too keen on them, what with the revoluting and throwing all those tea sets into the river. She chattered on, encouraged by the order's instruction that members should always say what was on their minds. Mr. Young was out of his depth, and too tired now to worry about it very much. The religious life probably made people a little odd. He wished Mrs. Young would wake up. Then one of the words in Sister Mary's wittering struck a hopeful chord in his mind. Would there be any possibility of me possibly being able to have a cup of tea, perhaps? He ventured. Oh my, said Sister Mary, her hand flying to her mouth. Whatever am I thinking of? Mr. Young made no comment. I'll see to it right away, she said. Are you sure you don't want coffee, though? There's one of those vendable machines on the next floor. Tea, please, said Mr. Young. My word, you really have gone native, haven't you? said Sister Mary gaily, as she bustled out. Mr. Young, left alone with one sleeping wife and two sleeping babies, sagged onto a chair. Yes, it must be all that, getting up early and kneeling and so on. Good people, of course, but not entirely compos mentis. He'd seen a Ken Russell film once. There had been nuns in it. There didn't seem to be any of that sort of thing going on, but no smoke without fire and so on. He sighed. It was then that Baby A woke and settled down to a really good wail. Mr. Young hadn't had a quiet screaming baby for years. He'd never been much good at it to start with. He'd always respected Sir Winston Churchill, and patting small versions of him on the bottom had always seemed ungracious. Welcome, to the world, he said warily. You get used to it after a while. The baby shut its mouth and glared at him as he were a recalcitrant general. Sister Mary chose that moment to come in with the tea. Satanist or not, she'd always found a plate and arranged some iced biscuits on it. There were the sort of you would only get at the bottom of certain tea-time assortments. Mr. Young's was the same pink as a surgical appliance and had a snowman picked out on it in white icing. I don't expect you normally have these, she said. They're what you'd call cookies. We call them biscuits. Mr. Young had just opened his mouth to explain that, yes, so did he, and so did people even in Lawton, when another nun rushed in, breathless. She looked at Sister Mary, realized that Mr. Young had never seen the inside of a pentagram, and confined herself to pointing at the baby A and winking. Sister Mary nodded and winked back. The nun wheeled the baby out. As methods of human communication go, a wink is quite versatile. You can say a lot with a wink. For example, the new nun's wink said, "Where the hell have you been? Baby B has been born. We're ready to make the switch. And here's you in the wrong room with the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness, drinking tea. Do you realize I've nearly been shot?" And, as far as she was concerned, Sister Mary's answering wink meant, "Here's the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and the lord of darkness. And I can't talk now because there's this outsider here." Whereas Sister Mary, on the other hand, had thought that the orderly's wink was more on the lines of, "Well done, Sister Mary. Switched over the babies all by herself. Now indicate to me the superfluous child, and I shall remove it and let you get on with your tea and with His Royal Excellency the American culture." And therefore her own wink had meant, "There you go, dearie. That's baby B. Now take him away and leave me to chat with His Excellency. I've always wanted to ask him why they have these tall buildings with all the mirrors on them." The subtleties of all this were quite lost on Mr. Young, who was extremely embarrassed at all this clandestine affection and was thinking that Mr. Russell and was thinking that Mr. Russell, he knew what he was talking about, and no mistake. Sister Mary's error might have been noticed, but the other nun had not she herself been severely rattled by the Secret Service man in Mrs. Dowling's room, who kept looking at her with growing unease. This was because they had been trained to react in a certain way to people in long-flowing robes and long-flowing headdresses, and were currently suffering from a conflict of signals. Humans suffering from a conflict of signals aren't the best people to be holding guns, especially when they have just witnessed a natural childbirth, which definitely looked an un-American way of bringing new citizens into the world. Also, they'd heard that there were missiles in the building. Mrs. Young stirred. "Have you picked a name for him yet?" said Sister Mary archly. "Huh?" said Mr. Young. Oh no, not really. If it was a girl, it would have been Lucinda after my mother, or Germaine. That was Deirdre's choice." "Wormwood's a nice name," said the nun, remembering her classics. "Or Damien. Damien's very popular." Okay, end the chapter. I really need to take a drink because my mouth is like drying out and it's hard to talk. Hmm. I'm not a big fan of these annotations at the bottom of the at the end of the chapter though, because they're like so long ago, after where the actual like thing was that I don't know what it was a footnote for. Like footnote number 1 says, i.e. everybody. Mm-hmm. I feel like they should be like at the bottom of the page or something. Yeah. But yeah, we'll be having an ad break in a minute and a half. I'll give Archibald his medicine and then we'll come back to this reading thing. And maybe I will not be tripping over my words anymore. Hello, Hattie. You're a giant marble. You're ginormous. Oh my god, you're huge. You're like a towering mountain. I am a fan of how many times they made me say the baby's full name though. It's pretty great. It's Although I need to find myself an actual like footnote marker and see if I can just click on it and see if it will just, you know, show me the footnote outright in a little window or something. I don't know how this Kindle handles this stuff. But yeah, Archibald, are you ready for your snack and your medicine? I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. I'll be taking that break now, so I'll be right back, alright? See you in a bit. Wah. Wah. Hotkeys, god dang it. Wah. Wah. God dang. Hotkeys. Wah. It doesn't work. Where's my hotkeys? Hello. I'm the book guy. I should have done all this humming before I came back, but I didn't. But at least I drank some water. As I said, there's like footnotes for these things in the book, but I don't suppose reading those footnotes mid-read is the best out loud. There's not gonna be any hardcore today, Hattie. But yes, I could just read them afterwards, I suppose. Let's see. Players. Footnote for players says, i.e. everybody. Yes. But the problem is that if I click on the footnote to see what it was for, it takes me all the way back to the actual page, which is really annoying. Let's see. Let's see. Number 2. Yeah. Let's just get to it, I suppose. Go to footnotes. I'll just skim through them later. Anathema device. Her mother, who was not a great student of religious matters, happened to read the word one day and thought it was a lovely name for a girl. Was 8.5 years old, and she was reading the book under the bedclothes with a torch. Other children learned to read on basic primers with colored pictures of apples, balls, cockroaches, and so forth. Not the device family. Anathema had learned to read from the book. It didn't have any apples and balls in it. It did have a rather good 18th century woodcut of Agnes Nutter being burned at the stake and looking rather cheerful about it. The first word she could recognize was nice. Very few people at the age of 8.5 know that nice also means scrupulously exact, but anathema was one of them. The second was accurate. The first sentence she had ever read out loud was, I tell ye, thief, and I charge ye with my words, 4 shall ride, and 4 shall also ride, and 3 shall ride the sky as twixt, and 1 shall ride in flames, and there shall be no stopping them, not fish, nor rain, nor road, neither devil nor angel, and ye shall be there also, Anathema. Anathema liked to read about herself. There were books which caring parents who read the right Sunday papers could purchase with their children's names printed in as the heroine or hero. Archibald, I swear to God. This was meant to interest the child in the book. In Anathema's case, it wasn't only her in the book, and it had been spot on so far, but her parents and her grandparents and everyone back to the 17th century. She was too young and too self-centered at this point to attract any importance to the fact that there was no mention made of her children, or indeed any events in her future further away than 11 years' time. When you are 8 and a half, 11 years is a lifetime, and of course, if you believed the book, it would be. She was a bright child with a pale face and black eyes and hair. As a rule, she tended to make people feel uncomfortable, a family trait she had inherited, along with being more psychic than was good for her. From her great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. She was precocious, and self-possessed. The only thing about Anathema her teachers ever had the nerve to upbraid her for was her spelling, which was not so much appalling as 300 years too late. The nuns took baby A and swapped it with baby B, under the noses of the attaché's wife and the Secret Service's men. By the cunning expedient of wheeling of one baby away, Chibi Wade, love, got to do that, it's the law, and wheeling another baby back, a little later. The cultural attaché himself, Thaddeus J. Dowling, had been called back to Washington in a hurry a few days earlier, but he had been on the phone to Mrs. Dowling throughout the birth experience, helping her with her breathing. It didn't help that he had been talking on the other line to his investment counselor. At one point, he'd been forced to put her on hold for 20 minutes. But that was okay. Having a baby is the single most joyous experience that two human beings can share, and he wasn't going to miss a second of it. He'd got one of the Secret Service men to videotape it for him. Evil in general does not sleep, and therefore doesn't see why anyone else should. But Crowley liked sleep. It was one of the pleasures of the world, especially after a heavy meal. He'd slept right through most of the 19th century, for example. Not because he needed to, simply because he enjoyed it. One of the pleasures of the world. Well, he'd better start really enjoying them now, while there was still time. The Bentley roared through the night, heading east. Of course, he was all in favor of Armageddon in general terms. If anyone had asked him why he'd been spending centuries tinkering in the affairs of mankind, he'd have said, "Oh, in order to bring about Armageddon, the triumph of hell." But it was one thing to work to bring it about, and quite another for it to actually happen. Crowley had always known that he would be around when the world ended because he was immortal and wouldn't have any alternative, but he'd hoped it would be a long way off. Because he rather liked people. It was a major following in a demon. Oh, he did his best to make their short lives miserable, because that was his job, but nothing he could think up was half as bad as the stuff they thought up themselves. They seemed to have a talent for it. It was built into the design somehow. They were born into a world that was against them in 1,000 little ways, and then devoted most of their energies to making it worse. Over the years, Crowley had found it increasingly difficult to find anything demonic to do which showed up against the natural background of generalized nastiness. There had been times over the past millennium when he'd felt like sending a message back below saying, "Look, we may as well give up right now. We might as well shut down this and pandemonium and everywhere and move up here. There's nothing we can do to them that they don't do themselves, and they do things we've never even thought of, often involving electrodes. They've got what we lack. They've got imagination. And electricity, of course." One of them had written it, hadn't he? "Hell is empty. And all the devils are here. Hmm? Hold on. Pause for a bit. Archie wants out. Go. Quick audio warning. Oh no, Pixie. Okay, thank you for the warning. Yes. Also, hold on. I need to take care of what Archie wrought in the background. It is. Hello, Pixie. Right, where were we? So what you're saying is I should mute this browser source. Let's see, how do I... Control audio via OBS, there you go, and mute. Thank you for the warning. I would have been so confused at that sounds because I don't suppose it's like registered in my brain properly that I still have the charity up here. Anyway, let's get back to reading. Crowley had got a commendation for the Spanish Inquisition. He had been in Spain then, mainly hanging around cantinas in the nicer parts, and hadn't even known about it until the commendation arrived. He'd gone to have a look, and had come back and got drunk for a week. That Hieronymus Bosch, what a weirdo. And just when you think they were more malignant than ever hell could be, they could occasionally show more grace than heaven ever dreamed of. Often the same individual was involved. It was this free will thing, of course. It was a bugger. Aziraphale had tried to explain it to him once. The whole point, he'd said, this was somewhere around 1020, when they'd first reached their little agreement. The whole point was that when a human was good or bad, it was because they wanted to be, whereas people like Crowley and, of course, himself, were set in their ways right from the start. People couldn't become truly holy, he said, unless they also had the opportunity to be definitely wicked. Crowley had thought about this for some time, and around 1023 had said, "Hang on, it only works right if you start everyone off equal, okay? You can't start someone off in a muddy shack in the middle of a war zone and expect them to do as well as someone born in a castle." "Ah," Aziraphale had said, "that's the good bit. The lower you start, the more opportunities you have." Crowley had said, "That's lunatic." "No," said Aziraphale, "it's ineffable." Aziraphale, the enemy, of course. But an enemy for 6,000 years now, which made him a sort of friend. Crowley reached down and picked up the car phone. Being a demon, of course, was supposed to mean you had no free will. But you couldn't hang around humans for very long without learning a thing or two. Mr. Young had not been too keen on Damien, or Wormwood, or any of Sister Mary Locatia's other suggestions, which had covered half of hell and most of the golden years of Hollywood. "Well," she said finally, a little hurt, "I don't think there's anything wrong with Errol or Carrie. Very nice American names, both of them." "I had fancied something more, traditional," explained Mr. Young. "We've always gone in for good, simple names in our family." Sister Mary beamed. "That's right. The old names are always the best, if you ask me." "A decent English name, like people had in the Bible," said Mr. Young. "Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John," he said, speculatively. Sister Mary winced. "Only they've never struck me as very good Bible names, really." Mr. Young added, "They sound more like cowboys and footballers." "Saul's nice," said Sister Mary, making the best of it. "I don't want something too old-fashioned," said Mr. Young. "Or Cain. Very modern sound. Cain, really? Sister Mary tried. Mr. Young looked doubtful. Or there's always Adam, said Sister Mary. That should be safe enough, she thought. Adam, said Mr. Young. It would be nice to think that the Satanist nuns had the surplus baby B, discreetly adopted, that he grew to be a normal, happy, laughing child, active and exuberant, and after that grew further to become a normal, fairy contented adult. And perhaps that's what happened. Let your mind dwell on his junior school prize for spelling, his unremarkable, although quite pleasant time at university, his job in the payroll department of the Tadfield and Norton Building Society, his lovely wife. Possibly you would like to imagine some children and a hobby, restoring vintage motorcycles perhaps, or breeding tropical fish. You don't want to know what could happen to Baby B. We like your version better, anyway. He probably wins prizes for his tropical fish. In the small house in Dorking, Surrey, a light was on in a bedroom window. Newton Pulsifer was 12, and thin, and bespectacled, and he should have been in bed hours ago. His mother, though, was convinced of her child's genius, and let him stay up past his bedtime to do his experiments. His current experiment was changing a plug on an ancient Bakelite radio his mother had given to him to play with. He sat at what he proudly called his worktop, a battered old table covered in curls of wire, batteries, little light bulbs, and a homemade crystal set that had never worked. He hadn't managed to get the Bakelite radio working yet either, but then again, he never seemed to be able to get that far. 3 slightly crooked metal aeroplanes hung on cotton cords from his bedroom ceiling. Even a casual observer could have seen that they were made by someone who was both painstaking and very careful, and also no good at making model aeroplanes. He was hopelessly proud of all of them, even the Spitfire, where he'd made rather a mess of the wings. He pushed his glasses back up the bridge of his nose, squinted down at the plug, and put down the screwdriver. He had high hopes for it this time. He had followed all the instructions on plug changing page 5 of the boy's own book of practical electronics, including 101 safe and educational things to do with electricity. He had attached the correct color-coded wires to the correct pins. He'd checked that it was the right amperage fuse. He'd screwed it all back together. So far, no problems. He plugged it into the socket. Then he switched the socket on. Every light in the house went out. Newton beamed with pride. He was getting better. Last time he'd done it, he'd blacked out the whole of Dorking. And the man from the electric had come over and had a word with his mum. He had a burning and totally unrequited passion for things electrical. They had a computer at school, and half a dozen studious children stayed on after school doing things with punched cards. When the teacher in charge of the computer had finally acceded to Newton's plan to be allowed to join them, Newton had only ever got to feed one little card into the machine. It had chewed it up and choked fatally on it. Newton was certain that the future was in computers, and when the future arrived, he'd be ready, in the forefront of the new technology. The future had its own ideas on this. It was all in the book. Adam, thought Mr. Young. He tried saying it to see how it sounded. Adam. He stared down at the golden curls of the adversary, destroyer of kings, angel of the bottomless pit, great beast that is called dragon, prince of this world, father of lies, spawn of Satan, and lord of darkness. You know, he concluded after a while, I think he actually looks like an Adam. It had not been a dark and stormy night. The dark and stormy night occurred 2 days later, about 4 hours after both Mrs. Dowling and Mrs. Young and their respective babies had left the building. It was a particularly dark and stormy night, and just after midnight, as the storm reached its height, a bolt of lightning struck the convent of the Chattering Order, setting fire to the roof of the vestry. No one was badly hurt by the fire, but it went on for some hours, doing a fair bit of damage in the process. The instigator of the fire lurked on a nearby hilltop and watched the blaze. Tall, thin, and the Duke of Hell. It was the last thing that needed to be done before his return to the nether regions, and he had done it. he could safely leave the rest to Crowley. Hastur went home. Technically, Aziraphale was a principality, but people made jokes about that these days. On the whole, neither he nor Crowley could have chosen each other's company, but they were both men, or at least man-shaped creatures of the world, and the arrangement had worked out to their advantage all this time. Besides, you grew accustomed to the only other phase that had been around more or less consistently for 6 millennia. The arrangement was very simple, so simple in fact that it didn't really deserve the capital letter, which it had got for simply being in existence for so long. It was a sort of sensible arrangement that many isolated agents, working in awkward conditions a long way from their superiors, reached with their opposite number when they realized that they have more in common with their immediate opponents than their remote allies. It meant a tacit non-interference in certain of each of others' activities. It made certain that, well, neither really won, also neither really lost, and both were able to demonstrate to their masters that the great strides that they were making against a cunning and well-informed adversary. It meant that Crowley had been allowed to develop Manchester, while Aziraphale had a free hand in the whole of Shropshire. Crowley took Glasgow, Aziraphale had Edinburgh. Neither claimed any responsibility for Milton Keynes, but both reported it as a success. And, of course, it had seemed even natural that they should, as it were, hold the fort for one another whenever common sense dictated. Both were of angel stock, after all. If one was going to haul for a quick temptation, it made sense to nip across the city and carry out a standard brief moment of divine ecstasy. It'd get done anyway, and being sensible about it gave everyone more free time and cut down on expenses. Aziraphale felt the occasional pang of guilt about this, but centuries of association with humanity was having the same effect on him as it was on Crowley, except in the other direction. Besides, the authorities didn't seem to care much who did anything, so long as it got done. Currently, what Aziraphale was doing was standing with Crowley by the duck pond in St. James's Park. They were feeding the ducks. The ducks in St. James's Park are so used to being fed bread by secret agents mating clandestinely that they have developed their own Pavlovian reaction. Put a St. James's Park duck in a laboratory cage and show it a picture of two men, one usually wearing a coat with a fur collar, the other something somber with a scarf, and it would look up expectantly. The Russian cultural attaché's black bread is particularly sought after by the more discerning duck, while the head of MI9 soggy Hovis with a marmite is relished by the connoisseurs. Aziraphale tossed across to a scruffy-looking drake, which caught it and sank immediately. The angel turned to Crowley. "Really, my dear," he murmured. "Sorry," said Crowley. "I was forgetting myself." The duck bobbed angrily to the surface. "Of course, we knew something was going on," Aziraphale said, "but one somehow imagines the sort of thing happening in America. They go in for that sort of thing over there." "It might yet do it at that," said Crowley gloomily. He gazed thoughtfully across the park to the Bentley, the back wheel of which was being industriously clamped. "Oh, yes, the American diplomat," said the angel. "Rather showy, one feels, as if Armageddon was some sort of cinematographic show that you wish to sell in as many countries as possible." "Every country," said Crowley. "The earth and all the kingdoms thereof." Aziraphale tossed the last scrap of bread at the ducks, who went off to pester the Bulgarian naval attaché and the furtive-looking man in a Cambridge tie, and carefully disposed of the paper bag in a waste-paper bin. He turned and faced Crowley. "We'll win, of course," he said. "You don't want that," said the demon. "Why not, pray?" "Listen," said Crowley desperately. "How many musicians do you think your side have got, eh? First grade, I mean." Aziraphale looked taken aback. "Well, I should think—" he began. "Two," said Crowley. "Elgar and Liszt. That's all. We got the rest. Beethoven, Brahms, all the Bachs, Mozart, the lot. Can you imagine eternity with Elgar?" Aziraphale shut his eyes. "All too easily," he groaned. "That's it then," said Crowley, a gleam of triumph. He knew Aziraphale's weak spot, all right. No more compact discs, no more Albert Hall, no more proms, no more Glindborn. Just celestial harmonies all day long. Ineffable, Aziraphale murmured. Like eggs without salt, he said. Which reminds me, no salt, no eggs. No gravlax with dill sauce. No fascinating little restaurants where they know you. No Daily Telegraph crossword. No small antique shops. No bookshops either. No interesting old editions. No... Crowley scraped the bottom of Aziraphale's barrel of interests. Regency silver snuff boxes. But after we win, life will be better, croaked the angel. But it won't be as interesting. Look, you know I'm right. You'd be as happy with a harp as I'd be with a pitchfork. You know we don't play harps. And we don't use pitchforks. I was being rhetorical. They stared at one another. Aziraphale spread his elegantly manicured hands. My people are more than happy for it to happen, you know. It's what it's all about, you see. The great final test. Flaming swords, the 4 horsemen. Seas of blood, the whole tedious business, he shrugged. And then... game over. Insert coin? Said Crowley. Sometimes I find your methods of expression a little difficult to follow. I like the seas as they are. It doesn't happen to happen. You don't have to test everything to destruction just to see if you made it right. Aziraphale shrugged again. That's ineffable wisdom for you, I'm afraid. The angel shuddered and pulled his coat around him. Gray clouds were piling up over the city. Let's go somewhere warm, he said. You're asking me? Said Crowley glumly. They walked in somber silence for a while. It's not that I disagree with you, said the angel, as they plodded across the grass. It's just that I'm not allowed to disobey. You know that. Me too, said Crowley. Aziraphale gave him a sidelong glance. Oh, come now, he said. You're a demon, after all. Yeah, but my people are only in favor of disobedience in general terms. It's specific disobedience they come down on heavily. Such as disobedience to themselves? You got it? You'd be amazed. Or perhaps you wouldn't be. How long do you think we got? Crowley waved a hand at the Bentley which unlocked its doors. The prophecies differ, said Aziraphale, sliding into the passenger seat. Certainly until the end of the century, although we may expect certain phenomena before then. Most of the prophets of the past millennium were more concerned with scansion than accuracy. Crowley pointed to the ignition key. It turned. What? He said. You know, said the angel helpfully. And the world unto an end shall come, in Tumpty 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 1, or 2 or 3, or whatever. 3 aren't many good theories for 6. It's probably a good year to be in. And, what sort of phenomena? 2-headed calves, signs in the sky, geese flying backwards, showers of fish, that sort of thing. The presence of the Antichrist affects the natural operation of causality. Crowley put the Bentley in gear. Then he remembered something. He snapped his fingers. The wheel clamps disappeared. Let's have lunch, he said. I own you one from, when was it? Paris, 1793, said Aziraphale. Oh, yes, the Reign of Terror. That was one of yours, wasn't it? Or, one of ours. Wasn't it yours? Can't recall. It was quite a good restaurant, though. As they drove past an astonished traffic warden, his notebook spontaneously combusted, to Crowley's amazement. I'm pretty certain I didn't mean to do that, he said. Aziraphale blushed. That was me, he said. I had always thought that your people invented them. Did you? We thought they were yours. Crowley stared at the smoke in the rearview mirror. Come on, he said. Let's do the Ritz. Crowley had not bothered to book. In his world, table reservations were things that happened to other people. Also realized I forgot my music. Doo-doo. There you go. Right. Next chapter. This book is broken up into these sub chapters, just like Color of Magic was, so I might need to pause more often, I suppose, than entire chapter is worth. Anyway, let us continue this book. Welcome back, Shala, by the way. Aziraphale collected books. If he were totally honest with himself, he would have had to admit that his bookshop was simply somewhere to store them. He was not unusual in this. In order to maintain his cover as a typical second-hand bookseller, he used every means short of actual physical violence to prevent customers from making a purchase. Unpleasant, damp smells, glowering looks, erratic opening hours. He was incredibly good at it. He had been collecting for a long time, and like all collectors, he specialized. He had more than 60 books of predictions concerning developments in the last handful of centuries of the second millennium. He had a penchant for wild first editions, and he had a complete set of the infamous Bibles, individually named from errors in typesetting. These Bibles included the Unrighteous Bible, so called from a printer's error which caused it to proclaim in Corinthians, "Know ye not, the unrighteous shall inherit the kingdom of God," and the Wicked Bible, printed by Barker and Lucas in 1632, in which the word "not" was omitted from the seventh commandment, making it, "Thou shalt commit adultery." There were the Discharge Bible, the Treacle Bible, the Standing Fishes Bible, the Charing Cross Bible, and the rest. Aziraphale had them all, even the very rarest, a Bible published in 1651 by the London publishing firm of Bilton and Skaggs. It had been the first of their three great publishing disasters. The book... Sorry, I choked. Give me a second. It seems I'm not fully recovered from my sniffles yet. For a massive great glob of stuff came from my nose into my throat. Anyway, the book was commonly known as the Bugger Al This Bible. The lengthy compositor's error, if such it may be called, occurs in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 48, verse 5. Bugger all this Bible. And by the order of Dan, from the east side to the west side, a portion for Aphir. And by the order of Aphir, from the east side even unto the west side, a portion for Naphtali. And by the border of Naphtali, from the east side unto the west side, a portion of Manasseh. Bugger all this for a lark. I'm sick to my heart of typesetting. Master Bilton, if no gentleman, and Master Skaggs no more than a tight-fisted Southwark noble stick. I tell you, one a day like this, anyone with half of an oz of sense should be out in sunshine, and not stuck here all in the lifelong day in this moldy old Byre Lady workshop at colon exclamation mark asterisk. And by the border of the Ephraim, from the east side even unto the west side, a portion for Reuben. Bilton and Skaggs' second great publishing disaster occurred in 1653. By a stroke of rare good fortune, they had obtained one of the famed Lost Quartos. The three Shakespeare plays never reissued in folio edition, and now totally lost to scholars and playgoers. Only their names have come down to us. This one was Shakespeare's earliest play, the Comedy of Robin Hood, or The Forests of Sherwood. Master Bilton had paid almost 6 guineas for the quarto, and believed he could make nearly twice that much back in the hardcover folio alone. Then he lost it. Bilton and Skaggs' third great publishing disaster was never entirely comprehensible to either of them. Everywhere you looked, books of prophecy were selling like crazy. The English edition of Nostradamus' Centuries had gone into its third printing, and 5 Nostradamuses, all claiming to be the only genuine one, were on triumphant signing tours, and Mother Shipton's collection of prophecies was printing out of the shops. Each of the great London publishers, there were 8 of them, had at least one book of prophecy on its list. Every single one of the books was wildly inaccurate, but their air of vague and generalized omnipotence made them immensely popular. They sold in their thousands and in their tens of thousands. "It was a license to print money," said Master Bilton to Master Skaggs. "The public are crying out for such rubbish. We must straightway print a book of prophecy by some hag." The manuscript arrived at their door the next morning. The author's sense of timing, as always, was exact. Although neither Master Bilton nor Master Skaggs realized it, the manuscript they had been sent was the sole prophetic work in all of human history to consist entirely of completely correct predictions concerning the following 340-odd years, being a precise and accurate description of the events that would culminate in Armageddon. It was on the money in every single detail. It was published by Bilton and Skaggs in September 1655, in a good time for the Christmas trade, and it was the first book printed in England to be remaindered. It didn't sell. Not even the copy in the tiny Lancashire shop with local author on a piece of cardboard next to it. The author of the book, one Agnes Nutter, was not surprised by this. But then it would have taken an awful lot to surprise Agnes Nutter. Anyway, she had not written it for the sales, or the royalties, or even for the fame. She had written it for the single gratis copy of the book that an author was entitled to. No one knows what happened to the legions of unsold copies of her book. Certainly none remain in any museums or private collections. Even Aziraphale does not possess a copy, but would go weak at the knees at the thought of actually getting his exquisitely manicured hands on one. In fact, only one copy of Agnes Nutter's prophecies remained in the entire world. It was on a bookshelf about 40 miles away from where Crowley and Aziraphale were enjoying a rather good lunch, and metaphorically, it had just begun to tick. It's kinda difficult sometimes to read these dialogues because they're written in oldie English kind of way, when they're like written about old English things. Not like just like in the classic ye olde English, but in the way where typesetting used to use like lowercase f looking letters for s's. So it's a little bit difficult. Anyway, let us continue further. And now it was 3 o'clock. The Antichrist had been on Earth for 15 hours, and one angel and one demon had been drinking solidly for 3 of them. They sat opposite one another in the back room of Aziraphale's dingy old bookshop in Soho. Most bookshops in Soho have back rooms, and most of the back rooms are filled with rare or at least very expensive books. But Aziraphale's books didn't have illustrations. They had old brown covers and crackling pages. Occasionally, if he had no alternative, he'd sell one. And occasionally, serious men in dark suits would come calling and suggest very politely that perhaps he'd like to sell the shop itself so that it could be turned into the kind of retail outlet more suited to the area. Sometimes they'd offer cash, in large rolls of grubby 50-pound notes. Or sometimes, while they were talking, other men in dark glasses would wander around the shop shaking their heads and saying how inflammable paper was and what a fire trap he had here. And Aziraphale would nod and smile and say that he'd think about it, and then they'd go away, and they'd never come back. Just because you're an angel doesn't mean you have to be a fool. The table in front of the two of them was covered in bottles. "The point is," said Crowley, The point is... He tried to focus on Aziraphale. "The point is," he said, and tried to think of a point. "The point I'm trying to make," he said, brightening, "is the dolphins. That's my point." "Kind of fish," said Aziraphale. No, said Crowley, shaking a finger. "It's a mammal. Your actual mammal. Difference is..." Crowley waded through the swamp of his mind and tried to remember the difference. "Difference is they, made out of water?" volunteered Aziraphale. Crowley's brow furrowed. "Don't think so. Pretty sure that's not it. Something about their young... whatever." He pulled himself together. The point is, Their brains. He reached for a bottle. What about their brains? Said the angel. Big brains. That's my point. Size of damn big brains. And then there's the whales. Brain City. Take it from me. Whole damn sea full of brains. Kraken, said the Aziraphale, staring moodily into his glass. Crowley gave him the long, cool look of someone who has just had a girder dropped in front of his train of thought. Great big bugger, said the Aziraphale, sleepeth beneath the thunders of the upper deep, under loads of huge and unnumbered bloody great seaweeds, you know. Supposed to rise to the surface right at the end when the sea boils. Yeah? Fact. There you are then, said Crowley, sitting back. Whole sea bubbling, poor old dolphin, so much seafood gumbo, no one giving a damn. Same with gorillas. Oops, they say, sky gone all red, stars crashing to the ground. What they putting in the bananas these days, and then... They make nests, you know. Gorillas, said the angel, pouring another drink and managing to hit the glass on the third go. Nah. God's truth, saw a film. Nests. That's birds, said Crowley. Nests, insisted the Aziraphale. Crowley decided not to argue the point. There you are then, he said. All creatures great and small, great and small. Lots of them with brains, and then... Bazam! But you're part of it, said the Aziraphale. You tempt people. You're good at it. Crowley thumped his glass on the table. That's different. I don't have to say yes. That's the ineffable bit, right? Your side made it up. You've got to keep testing people, but not your destruction. All right. I don't like it any more than you. But I told you, I can't not do what I'm told. I'm an angel. There's no theaters in heaven, said Crowley. And very few films. Don't you try to tempt me, said the Aziraphale wretchedly. I know you, you old serpent. Just you think about it, said Crowley relentlessly. You know what eternity is? You know what eternity is? I mean, do you know what eternity is? There's this big mountain, you see, a mile high, at the end of this universe, and one every 1,000 years there's a little bird. What little bird? Said Aziraphale suspiciously. This little bird I'm talking about, and every 1,000 years... The same bird every 1,000 years? Crowley hesitated. Yeah, he said. Bloody ancient bird, then. Okay. And every 1,000 years this bird limps, flies all the way to this mountain and sharpens its beak. Hold on. You can't do that. Between here and the end of the universe, there's loads of... The angel waved a hand expansively, if a little unsteadily. Loads of bugger all, dear boy. But it gets there anyway. Crowley persevered. How? It doesn't matter. It could use a spaceship, said the angel. Crowley subsided a bit. Yeah, he said, if you like. Anyway, this bird... Only, it is the end of the universe we're talking about, said the Aziraphale. So it had to be one of those spaceships where your descendants are the ones who get out at the other end. You have to tell your descendants, you say, when you get to the mountain, you gotta... He hesitated. What have you got to do? Sharpen his beak on the mountain, said Crowley. And then it flies back. In the spaceship. And after 1,000 years it goes and does it all again, said Crowley quickly. There was a moment of drunken silence. Seems a lot of effort just to sharpen the beak, mused the Aziraphale. Listen, said Crowley urgently. The point is that when the bird has worn the one mountain down to nothing... Right then, Aziraphale opened his mouth. Crowley just knew he was going to make some point about the relative hardness of birds' beaks in the granite mountains, and plunged on quickly. Then you still won't have finished watching The Sound of Music. Aziraphale froze. And you'll enjoy it, Crowley said relentlessly. You really will. My dear boy, you won't have a choice. Listen, heaven has no taste. Now, and not one single sushi restaurant. A look of pain crossed the angel's suddenly very serious face. I can't cope with this while I'm drunk, he said. I'm going to sober up. Me too. They both winced as the alcohol left their bloodstreams and sat up a bit more neatly. Aziraphale straightened his tie. I can't interfere with divine plans, he croaked. Crowley looked speculatively into his glass and then filled it again. What about diabolical ones? He said. Pardon? Well, it's got to be a diabolical plan, hasn't it? We're doing it. My side. Ah, but it's all part of the overall divine plan, said Aziraphale. Your side can't do anything without it being part of the ineffable divine plan, he added with a trace of smugness. You wish. No, that's the... Aziraphale snapped his finger irritably. The thing. What do you call it in your colorful idiom? The line at the bottom? The bottom line. Ah, yes, that. Well, if you're sure, said Crowley. No doubt about it. Crowley looked up slyly. Then you can't be certain. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can't be certain that thwarting it isn't part of the divine plan, too. I mean, you're supposed to thwart the wiles of the evil one at every turn, aren't you? Aziraphale hesitated. There is that, yes. You see a wile, you thwart. Am I right? Broadly? Actually, I encourage humans to do the actual thwarting. Because of ineffability, you understand. Right. So, all you got to do is thwart. Because if I know anything, said Crowley urgently, it's that the birth is just the start. It's the upbringing that's important. It's the influences. Otherwise, the child will never learn to use its powers. He hesitated. At least, not necessarily as intended. Certainly our side won't mind me thwarting you, said the Aziraphale thoughtfully. They won't mind that thought at all. Right. It would be a real feather in your wing. Crowley gave the angel an encouraging smile. What will happen to the child if it doesn't get a satanic upbringing, though? Said the Aziraphale. Probably nothing. It'll never know. But genetics. Don't tell me from genetics. What they've got to do with it, said Crowley. Look at Satan. Created as an angel, grows up to be the great adversary. Hey, if you're going to go on about genetics, you might as well say the kid will grow up to be an angel. After all, his father was really big in heaven in the old days. Saying he'll grow up to be a demon just because his dad became one is like saying a mouse with its tail cut off will give birth to tailless mice. No, upbringing is everything. Take it from me. And without unopposed satanic influences, well, at worst hell will have to start all over again. And the Earth gets at least another 11 years. That's got to be worth something, hasn't it? Now, Aziraphale was looking thoughtful again. You're saying the child isn't evil of itself? He said slowly. Potentially evil, potentially good, too, I suppose. Just this huge, powerful potentiality waiting to be shaped, said Crowley. He shrugged. Anyway, why are we talking about this good and evil? They're just names for sides. We know that. I suppose it's got to be worth a try, said the angel. Crowley nodded encouragingly. Agreed? Said the demon, holding out his hand. The angel shook it cautiously. It will certainly be more interesting than saints, he said. And it'll be for the child's own good, in the long run, said Crowley. We'll be godfathers, sort of, overseeing his religious upbringing, you might say. Aziraphale beamed. You know, I never have thought of that, he said. Godfathers. Well, I'll be damned. It's not too bad, said Crowley, when you get used to it. She was known... Actually, ad breaks are coming in 5 minutes, and I gotta run to the toilet, so I suppose let's just take that ad break now. And we'll continue real fast, okay? Thank you, ad breaks. Be right back. I hate you, ad breaks. I've returned. Hello. Goodbye, music. Goodbye. I should really set up this music thing to disappear when I'm reading. It doesn't need to be here. Anyway. Let's see. She was known as Scarlet, and at that time she was selling arms, though it was beginning to lose its savor. She never stuck at one job for very long. 400 years at the outside, you don't want to get in a rut. Her hair was true auburn, neither ginger nor brown, but deep and burnished copper color, and it fell to her waist in tresses that men would kill for, and indeed often had. Her eyes were a startling orange. She looked 25, and always had. She had a dusty brick-red truck full of assorted weaponry, and an almost unbelievable skill at getting it across any border in the world. She had been on her way to a small West African country where a minor civil war was on progress, to make a delivery which would, with any luck, turn it into a major civil war. Unfortunately, the truck had broken down, far beyond even her ability to repair it. And she was very good with machinery these days. She was in the middle of a city at the time. The city in question was the capital of Kumbolaland, an African nation which had been at peace for the last 3,000 years. For about 30 years it was Sir Humphrey Clarkson land, but since the country had absolutely no mineral wealth and the strategic importance of a banana, it was accelerated towards self-government with almost unseemly haste. Kumbolaland was poor, perhaps, and undoubtedly boring, but peaceful. Its various tribes, who got along with one another quite happily, had long since beaten their swords into plowshares. A fight had broken out in the city square in 1952 between a drunken ox driver and an equally drunken ox thief. People were still talking about it. Scarlet yawned in the heat. She fanned her head with her broad-brimmed hat, left the useless truck in the dusty street, and wandered into a bar. She bought a can of beer, drained it, then grinned at the barman. "I got a truck needs repairing," she said. "Anyone around I can talk to?" The barman grinned white and huge and expansively. He'd been impressed by the way she drank her beer. "Only Nathan, miss. But Nathan has gone back to Kaunda to see his father-in-law's farm." Scarlet bought another beer. "So, this Nathan, any idea when he'll be back?" "Perhaps next week, perhaps 2 weeks' time. Dear lady, that Nathan, he's a scamp, no?" He leaned forward. "You traveling alone, miss?" he said. "Yes." "Could be dangerous. Some funny people on the roads these days. Bad men, not local boys," he added quickly. Scarlet raised a perfect eyebrow. Despite the heat, he shivered. "Thanks for the warning," Scarlet purred. Her voice sounded like something that lurks in the long grass, visible only by the twitching of its ears until something young and tender wobbles by. She tipped her hat to him and strolled outside. The hot African sun beat down on her. Her truck sat in the street with a cargo of guns and ammunition and landmines. It wasn't going anywhere. Scarlet stared at the truck. A vulture was sitting on its roof. It had traveled 300 miles with Scarlet so far. It was belching quietly. She looked around the street. A couple of women chatted on the street corner. A bored market vendor sat in front of a heap of colored gourds, fanning the flies. A few children played lazily in the dust. "What the hell," she said quietly. "I could do with a holiday anyway." That was Wednesday. By Friday, the city was a no-go area. By the following Tuesday, the economy of Kumbolaland was shattered. 20,000 people were dead, including the barman shot by the rebels while storming the market barricades. Almost 100,000 people were injured. All of Scarlet's assorted weapons had fulfilled the function for which they had been created, and the vulture had died of greasy degeneration. Scarlet was already on the last train out of the country. It was time to move on, she felt. She'd been doing arms for too damn long. She wanted a change. Something with openings. She quite fancied herself a newspaper journalist. A possibility. She fanned herself with her hat and crossed her long legs in front of her. Farther down the train, a fight broke out. Scarlet grinned. People were always fighting, over her and around her. It was rather sweet, really. Sable had black hair, a trim black beard, and he had just decided to go corporate. He did drinks with his accountant. "How we doing, Franny?" he asked. 12 million copies sold so far. Can you believe that? They were doing drinks in a restaurant called Top of the Sixes, on top of the 666 Fifth Avenue in New York. This was something that amused Sable ever so slightly. From the restaurant windows you could see the whole of New York at night. The rest of New York could see the huge red 666s that adorned all four sides of the building. Of course, it was just another street number. If you started counting, you'd be bound to get to it eventually. But you had to smile. Sable and his accountant had just come from a small, expensive, and particularly exclusive restaurant in Greenwich Village, where the cuisine was entirely nouvelle: a string bean, a pea, and a sliver of chicken breast, aesthetically arranged on a square china plate. Sable had invented it the last time he'd been in Paris. His accountant had polished her meat and chewed veg off in under 50 seconds, and had spent the rest of the meal staring at the plate, the cutlery, and from time to time at her fellow diners, in a manner that suggested that she was wondering what they'd taste like, which was, in fact, the case. It had amused Sable enormously. He toyed with his Perrier. 12 million, huh? That's good. That's pretty good. That's great. So, we're going corporate. It's time to blow the big one, am I right? California, I think. I want factories, restaurants, the whole schmear. We'll keep the publishing arm, but it's time to diversify, yeah? Franny nodded. Sounds good, Sable. We'll need... She was interrupted by a skeleton. A skeleton in a Dior dress, with tanned skin stretched almost to snapping point over the delicate bones of her skull. The skeleton had long blonde hair and perfectly made-up lips. She looked like the person mutters around the whole world chew. She looked like the person mutters around the world point chew, muttering, "That's what'll happen to you if you don't eat your greens." She looked like a famine-relieved poster with style. She was New York's top fashion model, and she was holding a book. She said, "Excuse me, Mr. Sable. I hope you don't mind me intruding, but your book, it's changed my life. I was wondering, would you mind signing it for me?" She stared imploringly at him with eyes deep sunk in gloriously overshadowed sockets. Sable nodded graciously and took the book from her. It was not surprising that she had recognized him, for his dark gray eyes stared out from his photo on the foil-embossed cover. Deep Land Dieting. Slim Yourself Beautiful, the book was called. The diet book of the century. "How do you spell your name?" he asked. "Cheryl. 2 R's, 1 I, 1 L. "You remind me of an old friend," he told her, as he wrote swiftly and carefully on the title page. "There you go, glad you liked it. Always good to meet a fan." What he'd written was this: Cheryl, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. It's from the Bible, he told her. She closed the book reverently and backed away from the table, thanking Sable. He didn't know how much this meant to her. He had changed her life. Truly, he had. He had never actually earned the medical degree he claimed, since there hadn't been any universities in those days, but Sable could see she was starving to death. He gave her a couple of months at the outside. The plan. Handle your weight problem, terminally. Franny was stabbing at her laptop computer hungrily, planning the next phase in Sable's transformation of the eating habits of the Western world. Sable had bought her the machine as a personal present. It was very, very expensive, very powerful, and ultra slim. He liked slim things. There's a European outfit who can buy into for the initial toehold. Holdings Incorporated. They'll give us the Liechtenstein tax base. Now, if we channel funds out through the Caymans into Luxembourg and from there to Switzerland, we could pay for the factories in... But Sable was no longer listening. He was remembering the exclusive little restaurant. It had occurred to him that he had never seen so many rich people so hungry. Sable grinned. The honest, open grin that goes with job satisfaction. Perfect and pure. He was just killing time until the main event, but he was killing it in such exquisite ways. Time and sometimes people. Sometimes he was called White, or Blank, or Albus, or Chalky, or Wise, or Snowy, or any of 100 other names. His skin was pale, his hair a faded blonde, his eyes light gray. He was somewhere in his 20s at a casual glance, and a casual glance was all anyone ever gave him. He was almost entirely unmemorable. Unlike his two colleagues, he could never settle down in any one job for very long. He had all manner of interesting jobs in lots of interesting places. He had worked at the Chernobyl power station, and at Windscale, and at 3 Mile Island, always in minor jobs that weren't very important. He had been a minor but valued member of a number of scientific research establishments. He had helped to design the petrol engine and plastics and the ring pull can. He could turn his hand to anything. Nobody really noticed him. He was unobtrusive. His presence was cumulative. If you thought about it carefully, you could figure out he had to have been doing something, had to have been somewhere. Maybe he even spoke to you, but he was easy to forget, was Mr. White. At this time, he was working as deckhand on an oil tanker heading towards Tokyo. The captain was drunk in his cabin. The first mate was in the head. The second mate was in the galley. That was pretty much it for the crew. The ship was almost completely automated. There wasn't much a person could do. However, if a person just happened to press the emergency cargo release switch on the bridge, the automatic systems would take care of the releasing huge quantities of black sludge into the sea. Millions of tons of crude oil with devastating effect on the birds, fish, vegetation, animals, and humans of the region. Of course, there were dozens of fail-safe interlocks and foolproof safety backups, but what the hell? There always were. Afterwards, there was a huge amount of argument as to exactly whose fault it was. In the end, it was left unresolved. The blame was apportioned equally. Neither the captain, the first mate, nor the second mate ever worked again. For some reason, nobody gave much of a thought to Seaman White, who was already halfway to Indonesia. On a tramp steamer piled high with rusting metal, barrels of a particularly toxic weed killer. And there was another. He was in the square in Kambola land, and he was in the restaurants, and he was in the fish, and in the air, and in the barrels of weed killer. He was on the roads, and in houses, and in palaces, and in hovels. There was nowhere that he was a stranger, and there was no getting away from him. He was doing what he did best, and what he was doing was what he was. He was not waiting. He was working. Harriet Dowling returned home with her baby, which, on the advice of Sister Faith Prolix, who was more persuasive than Sister Mary, and with the telephonic agreement of her husband, she had named Warlock. The culture attaché returned home a week later and pronounced the baby the spit of his side of the family. He also had his secretary advertise in The Lady for a Nanny. Crowler had seen Mary Poppins on television one Christmas. Indeed, behind the scenes, Crowley had had a hand in most television, although it was on the invention of the game show that he truly prided himself. He toyed with the idea of a hurricane as an effective and incredibly stylish way of disposing of the queue of nannies that would certainly form, or possibly stack up in a holding pattern outside the cultural attaché's Regent's Park residence. He contented himself with a wildcat tube strike, and when the day came, only one nanny turned up. She wore a knit tweed suit and discreet pearl earrings. Something about her might have said nanny, but it said it in an undertone of the sort employed by British butlers in a certain type of American film. It also coughed discreetly and muttered that she could well be the sort of nanny who advertises unspecified but strangely explicit services in certain magazines. Her flat shoes crunched up the gravel drive, and the gray dog pattered silently by her side, white flecks of saliva dripping from its jaw. Its eyes glinted scarlet, and it glanced from side to side hungrily. She reached the heavy wooden door, smiled to herself, a brief satisfied flicker, and rang the bell. It donged gloomily. The door was opened by a butler, as they say, of the old school. "I am Nanny Ashtoreth," she told him, "and this," she continued, while the gray dog at her side eyed the butler carefully, working out, perhaps, where it would bury the bones, "is Rover." She left the dog in the garden and passed her interview with flying colors, and Mrs. Dowling led the nanny to see her new charge. She smiled unpleasantly. "What a delightful child," she said. He'll be wanting a little tricycle soon. By one of those coincidences, another member of staff arrived at the same afternoon. He was the gardener. As it turned out, he was amazingly good at his job. No one quite worked out why this should be the case, since he never seemed to pick up a shovel and made no effort to rid the garden of the sudden flocks of birds that filled it and settled all over him at every opportunity. He just sat in the shade while around him the residence gardens bloomed and bloomed. Warlock used to come down to see him when he was old enough to toddle, and Nanny was doing whatever it was she did on her afternoons off. "This year's brother Slug," the gardener would tell him, "and this tiny little critter is Sister Potato Weevil. Remember, Warlock, as you walk your way through the highways and byways of life's rich and fulsome path, to have love and reverence for all living things." "Nanny says that living things is fit only to be ground under my heels, Mr. Francis," said little Warlock, stroking Brother Slug, and then wiping his hand conscientiously on his Kermit the Frog overall. "You don't listen to that woman," Francis would say. "You listen to me." At night, Nanny Ashtoreth sang nursery rhymes to Warlock. "Oh, the grand old Duke of York, he had 10,000 men. He marched them up to the top of the hill, and crushed all the nations of the world, and brought them under the rule of Satan our master. And this little piggy went to Hades. This little piggy stayed home. This little piggy ate raw and steaming human flesh. This little piggy violated virgins. And this little piggy clambered over a heap of dead bodies to get to the top." "Bobo Francis, the gardener said that I must selflessly practice virtue and love to all living things," said Warlock. "You don't listen to that man, darling," the nanny would whisper, as she tucked him into his little bed. "You listen to me." And so it went. The arrangement worked perfectly. A no-score win. Nanny Ashtoreth brought the child a little tricycle, but could never persuade him to ride it inside the house. And he was scared of Rover. In the background, Crowley and Aziraphale met on the tops of buses, and in art galleries, and at concerts, compared to notes, and smiled. When Warlock was 6, his nanny left, taking Rover with her. The gardener handed in his resignation on the same day. Neither of them left with quite the same spring in their step with which they had arrived. Warlock now found himself educated by 2 tutors. Mr. Harrison taught him about Attila the Hun, Vlad Dracul, and the darkness intrinsic in the human spirit. He tried to teach Warlock how to make rabble-rousing political speeches to sway the hearts and minds of multitudes. Mr. Cortez taught him about Florence Nightingale, Abraham Lincoln, and the appreciation of art. He tried to teach him about free will, self-denial, and doing unto others as you would wish them to do to you. They both read to the child exclusively from the Book of Revelation. Despite their best efforts, Warlock showed a regrettable tendency to be good at maths. Neither of his tutors was entirely satisfied with his progress. When Warlock was 10, he liked baseball. He liked plastic toys that transformed into other plastic toys indistinguishable from the first set of plastic toys, except to the trained eye. He liked his stamp collection. He liked banana-flavored bubblegum. He liked comics and cartoons and his BMX bike. Crowley was troubled. They were in the cafeteria of the British Museum, another refuge for all weary foot soldiers of the Cold War. At the table to their left, 2 ramrod straight Americans in suits were surreptitiously handing over a briefcase full of deniable dollars to a small dark woman in sunglasses. At the table on their right, the deputy head of MI7 and the local KGB section officer argued over who got to keep the receipt for the tea and buns. Crowley finally said what he had not even dared to think for the last decade. "If you ask me," Crowley said to his counterpart, "he's too bloody normal." Aziraphale popped another deviled egg into his mouth and washed it down with coffee. He dabbed his lips with a paper napkin. "It's my good influence," he beamed. "Or rather, credit where credit's due. That of my little team." Crowley shook his head. "I'm taking that into account. Look, by now he should be trying to warp the world around him to his own desires, shaping it in his own image, that kind of stuff. Well, not actually trying. He'll do it without even knowing it. Have you seen Any evidence of that happening? Well, no, but by now he should be a powerhouse of raw force. Is he? Is he? Well, not as far as I've noticed, but he's too normal. Crowley drummed his fingers on the table. I don't like it. There's something wrong. I just can't put my finger on it. Aziraphale helped himself to Crowley's slice of angel cake. Well, he's a growing boy, and of course there's been the heavenly influence in his life. Crowley sighed. I just hope he'll know how to cope with the hellhound, that's all. Aziraphale raised one eyebrow. A hellhound? On his 11th birthday, I received a message from hell last night. The message had come during the Golden Girls, one of Crowley's favorite television programs. Rose had taken 10 minutes to deliver what could have been quite a brief communication, and by the time non-infernal service was restored, Crowley had quite lost the thread of the plot. They're sending him a hellhound to pad by his side and guard him from all harm. Biggest one they've got. Won't people remark on the sudden appearance of a huge black dog? His parents, for a start. Crowley stood up suddenly, treading on the foot of a Bulgarian cultural attaché who was talking animatedly to the keeper of Her Majesty's antiques. Nobody's gonna notice anything out of the ordinary. It's reality, Angel, and young Warlock can do what he wants to that, whether he knows it or not. When does it turn up then, this dog? Does it have a name? I told you, on his 11th birthday, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It'll sort of home in on him. He's supposed to name it himself. It's very important that he names it himself. It gives it its purpose. It'll be killer or terror or stalks by night, I expect. Are you going to be there? Asked the Angel, nonchalantly. Wouldn't miss it for the worlds, said Crowley. I do hope there's nothing too wrong with the child. We'll see how he reacts to the dog anyway. That should tell us something. I hope he'll send it back, or be frightened of it if he does name it. We've lost. He'll have all its powers and Armageddon is just around the corner. I think, said Aziraphale, sipping his wine, which had just ceased to be a slightly vinegary Beaujolais and had become a quite acceptable but rather surprised Chateau Latif 1875. I think I'll see you there. Although he did have to, wait, this ends the chapter actually, and these are footnotes. Let's see what the footnotes actually say. Footnote number 1. Although he did have to get up in 1832 to go to the lavatory, that's I suppose when Crowley was sleeping all century. Let's see. Note for Americans and other aliens. Milton Keyes is a new city approximately halfway between London and Birmingham. It was built to be modern, efficient, healthy, and all in all, a pleasant place to live. Many Britons find this amusing. Yeah, see, when they explain like a joke to people who are not like British, it is kind of difficult when it's like at the end of the chapter like this, and not like at the bottom of the page. Yeah, I'm not gonna read these footnotes, I don't think, because there's 10 of them. There's like a lot of footnotes. I think that is the end of that chapter. I suppose we can get through another chapter today. I think. Also, I see the donations are flowing. And good thing I turned the sound off. I would have been jump scared. I don't suppose it's on my end, though. It's probably what Pixie warned me about. But thank you to whoever donated anyway. Even if you can't hear me. Yeah. Alright. Quite a book to read, like, while having a charity around as well, though. About the Antichrist and Armageddon and such. Reading about Armageddon for charity. Sending vibes of thanks through the atmosphere. Yeah. That's what vibes of thanks sound like. Let me just have a drink of water and we can read another chapter here. Okay, maybe my plan of reading this during the entire weekend is a bit off. It seems like it might take another weekend because I'm only 17% through this. 2 weekends. That's fine. You feel the vibes. Big yawn coming up, hold on. It's not coming on. It's like I'm gonna yawn, but I'm not gonna yawn. Alright. Let us continue. It was a hot, fume-filled August day in central London. Warlock's 11th birthday was very well attended. There were 20 small boys and 17 small girls. There were a lot of men with identical blonde crew cuts, dark blue suits, and shoulder holsters. There was a crew of caterers who had arrived wearing jellies, cakes, and bowls of crisps. Their procession of vans was led by a vintage Bentley. The amazing Harvey and Wanda, children's parties a specialty, had both been struck down by an unexpected tummy bug, but by a providential turn of fortune a replacement had turned up practically out of the blue. A stage magician. Everyone has his little hobby. Despite Crowley's urgent advice, Aziraphale was intending to turn his to good use. Aziraphale was particularly proud of his magical skills. He had attended a class in the 1870s run by John Masculine, and had spent almost a year practicing sleight of hand, palming coins and taking rabbits out of hats. He had felt at the time quite good at it. The point was that although Aziraphale was capable of doing things that could make the entire magic circle hand in their wands, he never applied what might be called his intrinsic power to the practice of sleight of hand conjuring, which was a major drawback. He was beginning to wish that he'd continued practicing. Still, he mused, it was like riding a velocipede. You never forgot how. His magician's coat had been a little dusty, but it felt good once it was on, even if his old pattern began to come back to him. The children watched him in blank, disdainful incomprehension. Behind the buffed Crowley in his white waiter's coat cringed with contact embarrassment. Now then, young masters and mistresses, do you see my battered old top hat? What a shocking bad hat, as you young uns do say. And see, there's nothing in it, but bless my britches, who's this rum customer? Why, it's our furry friend Harry the Rabbit. It was in your pocket, pointed out Warlock. The older children nodded agreement. What did you think they were, kids? Aziraphale remembered what Masculine had told him about dealing with hecklers. Make a joke of it, if you pudding heads. And if I do mean you, Mr. Fell, the name Aziraphale had adopted at that time. Make 'em laugh, and they'll forgive you anything. Oh, so you rumbled my hat trick, he chuckled. The children stared at him impassively. You're rubbish, said Warlock. I wanted cartoons anyway. He's right, you know, agreed a small girl with a ponytail. You are rubbish and probably a slur. Aziraphale stared desperately at Crowley. As far as he was concerned, young Warlock was obviously internally tainted. And sooner the black dog turned up and they could get away from this place, the better. F-slur. Now, do any of you young guns have such a thing as a threepenny bit about your persons? No, young master? Then what's this I see behind your ear? I got cartoons at my birthday, announced the little girl. And I got a Transformer and a My Little Ponier and a Decepticon Attacker and a Thunder Tank and a... Crowley groaned. Children's parties were obviously places where any angel with an ounce of common sense should fear to tread. Piping infant voices were raised in cynical merriment as Aziraphale dropped 3 linked metal rings. Yeah, that one, Hattie. Crowley looked away, and his gaze fell on a table heaped high with presents. From a tall plastic structure, two beady little eyes stared back at him. Crowley scrutinized them for a glint of red fire. You could never be certain when you were dealing with the bureaucrats of hell. It was always possible they had sent a gerbil instead of a dog. No, it was a perfectly normal gerbil. It appeared to be living in an exciting conclusion of cylinders, spheres, and treadmills, such as the Spanish Inquisition would have devised if they had access to plastic's molding press. He checked his watch. It had never occurred to Crowley to change his battery, which had rotted away 3 years previously, but it still kept perfect time. It was 2 minutes to 3. Aziraphale was getting more and more flustered. Do any of the company here assembled possess such a thing about their persons as a pocket handkerchief? No? In Victorian days, it had been unheard of for people not to carry handkerchiefs, and the trick which involved magically producing a dove who was even now pecking irritably at Aziraphale's wrist could not proceed without one. The angel tried to attract Crowley's attention, failed, and in desperation pointed to one of the security guards, who shifted uneasily. You, my fine jacksaws, come here. Now, if you inspect your breast pocket, I think you might find a fine silk handkerchief. No, sir, I'm afraid not, sir, said the guard, staring straight ahead. Aziraphale winked desperately. No, go on, dear boy, take a look, please. The guard reached a hand inside his inside pockets, looked surprised, and pulled out a handkerchief. Duck, egg blue, silk, with lace edging. Aziraphale realized almost immediately that the lace had been a mistake, as it caught onto the guard's holstered gun and sent it spinning across the room to land heavily in a bowl of jelly. The children applauded spasmodically. Hey, not bad, said the pigtailed girl. Warlock had already run across the room and grabbed the gun. Hands up, dog breaths, he shouted gleefully. The security guards were in quandary. Some of them fumbled for their own weapons, others started edging their way towards or away from the boy. The other children started complaining that they wanted guns as well, and the few of the more forward ones started trying to tug them from the guards who had been thoughtless enough to take their weapons out. Then someone threw some jelly at Warlock. The boy squeaked and pulled the trigger of the gun. It was a Magnum 32, CIA issue, gray, mean, heavy, capable of blowing a man away at 30 paces and leaving nothing more than a red mist, a ghastly mess, and a certain amount of paperwork. Aziraphale blinked. A thin stream of water squirted from the nozzle and soaked Crowley, who had been looking out the window, trying to see if there was a huge black dog in the garden. Aziraphale looked embarrassed. Then a cream cake hit him in the face. It was almost past 3. With a gesture, Aziraphale turned the rest of the guns into water pistols as well, and walked out. Crowley found him on the pavement outside, trying to extricate a rather squishy dove from the arm of his frock coat. It's late, said Aziraphale. I can see that, said Crowley. Comes off sticking up your sleeve. He reached out and pulled the limp bird from Aziraphale's coat, and breathed life back into it. The dove cooed appreciatively and flew off, a trifle warily. Not the bird, said the angel. The dog. It's late. Crowley shook his head, thoughtfully. We'll see. He opened the car door, flipped on the radio. I should be so lucky. Hello, Crowley. Hello, who is this? Dagon, Lord of the Flies, Master of Madness. Underduke of the Seventh Torment, what can I do for you? The Hellhound, I'm just checking that it got off okay? Released 10 minutes ago. Why? Hasn't it arrived? Is something wrong? Oh, no, nothing's wrong. Everything's fine. Oops, I can see it now. Good dog, nice dog. Everything's terrific. You're doing a great job down there, people. Well, lovely talking to you, Dagon. Catch you soon. Huh? He flipped off the radio. They stared at each other. There was a loud bang from inside the house, and the window shattered. Oh dear, muttered Aziraphale, not swearing with the practiced ease of one who has spent 6,000 years not swearing, and who was going to start now. I must have missed one. No dog, said Crowley. No dog, said Aziraphale. The demon sighed. Get in the car, he said. We've got to talk about this. Oh, and Aziraphale? Yes? Clean off that blasted cream cake before you get in. Alright. Big stretch. I love the radio. The radio is my favorite bit. Right. Let us continue. It was a hot, silent August day far from central London. By the side of the Tadfield Road, the dust weighed down the hogweed. Bees buzzed in the hedges. The air had a leftover and reheated feel. There was a sound like 1,000 metal voices shouting, "Hail!" cut off abruptly. And there was a black dog in the road. It had to be a dog. It was dog-shaped. There are some dogs which, when you meet them, remind you that, despite thousands of years of man-made evolution, every dog is still only 2 meals away from being a wolf. These dogs advanced deliberately, purposefully. The wilderness made flesh, their teeth yellow, their breath a stink. While in the distance their owners witter, "He's an old soppy really, just poke him if he's a nuisance." And in the green of their eyes, the red campfires of the Pleistocene gleam and flicker. This dog would make even a dog like that slink nonchalantly behind the sofa and pretend to be extremely preoccupied with its rubber bone. It was already growling, and the growl was a low, rumbling snarl of spring-coiled menace, the sort of growl that starts in the back of one throat and ends up in someone else's. Saliva dripped from its jaws and sizzled on the tar. It took a few steps forward and sniffed the sullen air. Its ears flicked up. There were voices, a long way off. A voice, a boyish voice, but one that had been created to obey, could not help but obey. When that voice said follow, it would follow. When it said kill, it would kill. His master's voice. It leapt the hedge and padded across the field beyond. A grazing bull eyed it for a moment, weighed its chances, then strolled hurriedly toward the opposite hedge. The voices were coming from a copse of straggly trees. The black hound slunk closer, jaws streaming. One of the other voices said, "He never will. You're always saying he will, and he never does. Catch your dad giving you a pet. An interesting pet, anyway. It'll probably be stick insects. That's your dad's idea of interesting." The hound gave the canine equivalent of a shrug, but immediately lost interest because now the master, the center of its universe, spoke. "It'll be a dog," it said. "Huh? You don't know it's going to be a dog. No one said it's going to be a dog. How do you know it's going to be a dog if no one said? Your dad'd be complaining about the food it eats the whole time." Privet. This third voice was rather more prim than the first two. The owner of a voice like that would be the sort of person who, before making a plastic model kit, would not only separate and count all the parts before commencing, as per the instructions, but also paint the bits that needed painting first, and leave them to dry properly prior to the construction. All that separated this voice from chartered accountancy was a matter of time. "They don't eat privet, Wensley. You never saw a dog eat privet." "Stick insects do. I mean, they're jolly interesting, actually. They eat each other when they're mating." There was a thoughtful pause. The hound slunk closer and realized that the voices were coming from a hole in the ground. The trees, in fact, concealed an ancient chalk quarry, now half overgrown with torn trees and vines. Ancient, but clearly not disused. Tracks crisscrossed it, smooth areas of slope indicated regular use by skateboards and the wall of death, or at least wall of seriously grazed knee cyclists. Old bits of dangerously frayed rope hung from some of the more accessible branches. Here and there sheets of corrugated iron and old wooden boards were wedged in branches. A burnt-out, rusting Triumph Herald estate was visible, half submerged in a drift of nettles. In one corner, a tangle of wheels and corroded wire marked the site of the famous Lost Graveyard where the supermarket trolleys came to die. If you were a child, it was paradise. The local adults called it the pit. The hound peered through a clump of nettles and spotted four figures sitting in the center of the quarry on that indispensable prop to good secret dens everywhere, the common milk crate. They don't. They do. But you bet you they don't, said the first speaker. It had a certain timbre to it that identified it as young and female, and was tinted with horrified fascination. They do, actually. I had 6 before we went on holiday, and I forgot to change the privet, and when I came back, I had one big fat one. Nah, that's not stick insects, that's praying mantises. I saw on the television where this big female one ate this other one and didn't make any notice. There was another crowded pause. What are you praying about? Said his master voice. Dunno, praying. They don't have to get married, I suspect. The hound managed to get one huge eye against an empty knothole in the quarry's broken-down fence and squinted downward. Anyway, it's like with bikes, said the first speaker authoritatively. I thought I was going to get this bike with 7 gears and one of them razor blade saddles and purple paint and everything, and they gave me this light blue one with the basket. A girl's bike. Well, you're a girl, said one of the others. That's sexism, that is. Going around giving people girly presents just because they're a girl. I'm going to get a dog, said his master's voice, firmly. His master had his back to him. The hound couldn't quite make out his features. Oh yeah, one of those great big Rottweilers, yeah? Said the girl with withering sarcasm. No, it's going to be the kind of dog you can have fun with, said his master's voice. Not a big dog. The eyes in the nettles vanished abruptly downwards. But one of those dogs that's brilliantly intelligent and can go down rabbit holes and has one funny ear that always looks inside out, and a proper mongrel too, a pedigree mongrel. Unheard by those within, there was a tiny clap of thunder on the lip of the quarry. It might have been caused by the sudden rushing of air into the vacuum caused by a very large dog becoming, for example, a small dog. The tiny popping noise that followed might have been caused by one ear turning itself inside out. And I'll call him, said his master's voice. I'll call him? Yes, said the girl. What are you going to call him? The hound waited. This was the moment. The naming. This would give it its purpose, its function, its identity. Its eyes glowed a dull red, even though they were a lot closer to the ground and dribbled into the nettles. I'll call him Dog, said his master positively. It saves a lot of trouble, a name like that. The hellhound paused. Deep in its diabolical canine brain it knew that something was wrong. But it was nothing if not obedient, and its great sudden love of its master overcome all misgivings. Who was it to say what size it should be, anyway? It trotted down the slope to meet its destiny. Strange, though. It had always wanted to jump up at people, but now it realized that against all expectation it wanted to wag its tail at the same time. And the chaps were a bit stretch and drink. Hey, Waterfall, hello. And shallow with your 420, hell yeah. 420 stream streak, baby, let's go. Crazy marble Waterfall. How crazy are you? Very do? I'm doing okay, just reading my book about Satan. Okie dokie. Let us continue. I love the Hellhound. I hope he just continues thinking very crazy, very confusing thoughts about this business. Okay. You said it was him, moaned Aziraphale, abstractedly picking this final lump of cream cake from his lapel. He licked his fingers clean. It was him, said Crowley. I mean, I should know, shouldn't I? Then someone else must be interfering. There isn't anything else. There's just us, right? Good and evil, one side or the other. He thumped the steering wheel. You'll be amazed at the kind of things they can do to you down there, he said. I imagine they're very similar to the sort of things they can do to one up there, said the Aziraphale. Come off it, you'll get ineffable mercy, said Crowley sourly. Yes? Did you ever visit Gomorrah? Sure, said the demon. There was this great little tavern where you could get these terrific fermented date palm cocktails with nutmeg and crushed lemongrass. I mean, afterwards. Oh. Aziraphale said, something must have happened in the hospital. It couldn't have. It was full of our people. Whose people? Said Aziraphale coldly. My people, corrected Crowley. Well, not my people, Satanists. He tried to say it dismissively. Apart from, of course, the fact that the world was an amazingly interesting place, which they both wanted to enjoy for as long as possible, there were a few things that the two of them agreed on, but they did see eye to eye about some of those people who, for some reason or another, were inclined to worship the Prince of Darkness. Crowley always found them embarrassing. You couldn't actually be rude to them, but you couldn't help feeling about them the same way that, say, a Vietnam War veteran would feel about someone who wears combat gear to neighborhood watch meetings. Besides, they were always so depressingly enthusiastic. Take all that stuff with the inverted crosses and pentagrams and cockerels. It mystified most demons. It wasn't the least bit necessary. All you needed to become a Satanist was an effort of will. You could be one all your life without even knowing what a pentagram was, without ever seeing a dead cockerel other than as chicken marengo. Besides, some of the old-style Satanists tended, in fact, to be quite nice people. They mouthed the words and went through the motions just like the people they thought of as their opposite numbers, and then went home and lived lives of mild, unassuming mediocrity for the rest of the week with never an unusually evil thought in their heads. And as for the rest of it, there were people who called themselves Satanists who made Crowley squirm. It wasn't just the things they did, it was the way they blamed it all on hell. They'd come up with some stomach-churning idea that no demon could have thought of in 1,000 years. Some dark and mindless unpleasantness that only a fully functioning human brain could conceive, then shout, "The devil made me do it!" and get the sympathy of the court when the whole point was that the devil hardly ever made anyone do anything. He didn't have to. That was what some humans found hard to understand. Hell wasn't a major reservoir of evil any more than heaven, in Crowley's opinion, was a fountain of goodness. They were just sides in the great cosmic chess game, where you found the real McCoy. The real grace and the real heart-stopping evil was right inside the human mind. Huh, said the Aziraphale. Satanists. I don't see how they could have messed it up, said Crowley. I mean, 2 babies, it's not exactly taxing, is it? He stopped. Through the mists of memory, he pictured a small nun who had struck him at the time as being remarkably loose-headed even for Satanists. And there had been someone else. Crowley vaguely recalled the pipe and the cardigan, the kind of zigzag pattern that went out of style in 1938. A man with expectant father written all over him. There must have been a 3rd baby. He told the Aziraphale. Not a lot to go on, said the angel. We know the child must be alive, said Crowley, so, how do we know? If it had turned up down there again, do you think I'd still be sitting here? Good point. So, all we've got to do is find it, said Crowley. Go through the hospital records. The Bentley's engine coughed into life, and the car leapt forward, forcing Aziraphale back into the seat. And then what? He said. And then we find the child. And then what? The angel shut his eyes as the car crabbed around the corner. Don't know. Good grief. I suppose get off the road, you clown. Your people wouldn't consider... And the scooter you rode in on! Giving me asylum? I was going to ask you the same thing. Watch out for that pedestrian! It's on the street. It knows what the risk it's taking, said Crowley, using the accelerating car between a parked car and a taxi and leaving a space which would have barely accepted him the best credit card. What's the road? What's the road? Where's this hospital anyway? Somewhere south of Oxford. Aziraphale grabbed the dashboard. You can't do 90 miles an hour in central London. Crowley peered at the dial. Why not? He said. You'll get us killed. Aziraphale hesitated. Inconveniently discorporated, he continued, lamely, relaxing a little. Anyway, you might kill other people. Crowley shrugged. The angel had never really come to grips with the 20th century and didn't realize that it's perfectly possible to do 19 miles an hour down Oxford Street. You just arranged matters so that no one was in the way. And since everyone knew that it was impossible to do 90 miles an hour down Oxford Street, no one noticed. At least cars were better than horses. The internal combustion engine had been a windfall for Crowley. The only horses he could have been seen riding on business in the old days were big black jobs with eyes like flame and hooves that struck sparks. That was de rigueur for a demon. Usually Crowley fell off. He wasn't much good with animals. Somewhere around Chiswick, Aziraphale scrabbled vaguely among the scree of tapes in the glove compartment. "What's a Velvet Underground?" he said. "You wouldn't like it," said Crowley. "Oh," said the angel dismissively. "Bebop. Do you know, Aziraphale, that probably if 1,000,000 human beings were asked to describe modern music, they wouldn't use the term bebop?" said Crowley. "Ah, this is more like it. Tchaikovsky," said Aziraphale, opening a case and slotting its cassette into the Blaupunkt. "You won't enjoy it," sighed Crowley. "It's been the car for more than a fortnight." A heavy bass beat began to thump through the Bentley as they sped past Heathrow. Aziraphale's brow furrowed. I don't recognize this," he said. "What is it?" "It's Tchaikovsky's Another One Bites the Dust," said Crowley, closing his eyes as they went through Slough. To while away the time as they crossed the sleeping Chilterns, they also listened to William Byrd's We Are the Champions and Beethoven's I Want to Break Free. Neither were as good as Vaughan Williams' Fat Bottom Girls. It is said that the devil has all the best tunes. This is broadly true, but heaven has the best choreographers. The Oxfordshire plain stretched out to the west, with a scattering of lights to mark the slumbering villages where the honest yeomen were settling down to sleep after a long day's editorial direction. Financial consulting or software engineering. Up here on the hill, a few glowworms were lighting up. The surveyor's theodolite is one of the more direful symbols of the 20th century. Set up anywhere in open countryside, it says, there will come road widening, yeah, and 2,000 home estates in keeping with the essential character of the village. Executive developments will be manifest. But not even the most conscientious surveyor surveys at midnight. And yet here the thing was, tripod legs deep in the turf. Not many theodolites have a hazel twig strapped to the top, either, or crystal pendulums hanging from them and Celtic runes carved into the legs. The soft breeze napped the cloak of the slim figure who was adjusting the knobs of the thing. It was quite a heavy cloak, sensibly waterproof, with a warm lining. Most books on witchcraft will tell you that witches work naked. This is because most books of witchcraft are written by men. The young woman's name was Anathema Device. She was not astonishingly beautiful. All her features considered individually were extremely pretty, but the entirety of her face gave the impression that it had been put together hurriedly from stock without reference to any plan. Probably the most suitable word is attractive, although people who knew what it meant and could spell it might add vivacious, although there is something very 50s about vivacious, so perhaps they wouldn't. Young women should not go out alone on dark nights, even in Oxfordshire, but any prowling maniac would have had more than his work cut out if he had accosted an Anathema Device. She was a witch, after all, and precisely because she was a witch, and therefore sensible, she put little faith in protective amulets and spells. She saved it all for a foot-long bread knife, which she kept in her belt. She sighed through the glass and made another adjustment. She muttered under her breath. Surveyors often mutter under their breath. They mutter things like, "Soon have a relief road through here faster than you can say Jack Robinson," or "That's 3.5 meters, give or take," said Nat's Whisker. This was an entirely different kind of muttering. "Darksome night and shining moon," muttered Anathema. "East by south, by west by southwest. West-southwest got you." She picked up a folded Ordnance Survey map and held it in the torchlight. Then she produced a transparent ruler and a pencil and carefully drew a line across the map. It intersected with another pencil line. She smiled, not because anything was particularly amusing, but because a tricky job had been done well. Then she collapsed the strange theodolite, strapped it onto the back of a sit-up-and-beg black bicycle leaning against the hedge, made sure the book was in the basket, and wheeled everything out to the misty lane. It was a very ancient bike, with a frame apparently made of drain pipes. It had been built long before the invention of the 3-speed gear, and possibly only just after the invention of the wheel. But it was nearly all downhill to the village. Hair streaming in the wind, cloak ballooning behind her like a sheet anchor, she let the two-wheeled juggernaut accelerate ponderously through the warm air. At least there wasn't any traffic at this time of night. Let's pause here, because there's ad breaks coming up. And take that ad break and be right back, I suppose. Yo, the book that I'm reading. So we got witches now, we got the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, we got devils and angels. This is a lot of characters. There's a lot going on. Hopefully my brain doesn't scramble from keeping track of all this. I'm bad at keeping track of things. Anyway, at least they're all funny named, so I don't have to remember who's who. They have funny enough names that I'll probably remember who's who. Mostly. Anyway. Let us continue. The Bentley's... I'm gonna burp or something, hold on. The Bentley's engine went pink. Pink as it cooled. Crowley's temper, on the other hand, was heating up. You said you saw it signposted, he said. Well, we flashed by it so quickly. Anyway, I thought you'd been here before. 11 years ago. Crowley heard the map onto the back seat and startled the engine again. Perhaps we should ask someone, said the Aziraphale. Oh yes, said Crowley. We'll stop and ask the first person we see walking along a track in the middle of the night, shall we? He jerked the car into gear and rode out into the beach-hung lane. There's something odd about this area, said the Aziraphale. Can't you feel it? What? Slow down a moment. The Bentley slowed again. Odd, muttered the angel. I keep getting these flashes of... He raised his hands to his temples. What? Said Crowley. Aziraphale stared at him. Love, he said. Someone really loves this place. Pardon? There seems to be this great sense of love. I can't put it any better than that, especially not to you. Do you mean like... Crowley began. There was a whir, a scream, and a clunk. The car stopped. Aziraphale blinked, lowered his hands, and gingerly opened the door. You've hit someone, he said. No, I haven't, said Crowley. Someone hit me. They got out. Behind the Bentley, a bicycle lay in the road. Its front shell bent into a creditable Mobius shape. Its back wheel clicking ominously to a standstill. Let there be light, said the Aziraphale. A pale blue glow filled the lane. From the ditch beside them somebody said, How the hell did you do that? The light vanished. Do what? Said the Aziraphale guiltily. Now the voice sounded muzzy. I think I hit my head on something. Crowley glared at the long metallic streak on the Bentley's glossy paintwork and a dimple in the bumper. The dimple popped back into shape. The paint healed. Up you get, young lady, said the angel, hauling Anathema out of the bracken. No bones broken. It was a statement, not a hope. There had been a minor fracture, but Aziraphale couldn't resist an opportunity to do good. You didn't have any lights, she began. Nor did you, said Crowley guiltily. Fair's fair. Doing a spot of astronomy, were we? Said Aziraphale, setting the bike upright. Various things clattered out of its front basket. He pointed to the battered theodolite. No, said Anathema. I mean, yes. And look what you've done to poor old Phaeton. I'm sorry? Said the Aziraphale. My bicycle is bent all to... Amazingly resilient, these old machines, said the angel brightly, handing it to her. The front wheel gleamed in the moonlight, as perfectly round as one of the circles of hell. She stared at it. "Well, since that's all sorted out," said Crowley, "perhaps it'd be best if we just all got on our, you wouldn't happen to know the way to, Lower Tadfield, would you?" Anathema was still staring at her bicycle. She was almost certain that it hadn't had the little saddlebag with a puncture repair kit when she set out. "It's just down the hill," she said. "This is my bike, isn't it?" "Oh, certainly," said Aziraphale, wondering if he'd overdone things. "Only I'm sure Phaeton never had a pump." The angel looked guilty. "But there's a place for one," he said, helplessly. "Two little hooks." Just down the hill, you said?" said Crowley, nudging the angel. "I think perhaps I must have knocked my head," said the girl. "We'd offer to give you a lift, of course," said Crowley quickly. "But there's nowhere for the bike." "Except the luggage rack," said the Aziraphale. "The Bentley hasn't—" "Oh. Huh." The angel scrambled the spilled contents of the bike's basket into the back seat and helped the stunned girl in after them. "One does not," he said to Crowley. "Pass by on the other side." "Your one might not. This one does. We have got other things to do, you know." Crowley glared at the new luggage rack. It had tartan straps. The bicycle lifted itself up and tied itself firmly in place. Then Crowley got in. "Where do you live, my dear?" Aziraphale oozed. "My bike didn't have light cider. Well, it did, but there's sort of, you put those double batteries in and they went moldy and I took them off," said Anathema. She glared at Crowley. "I have a bread knife, you know," she said. "Somewhere." Aziraphale looked shocked at the implication. "Madam, I assure you." Crowley switched on the lights. You didn't need them to see by, but they made the other humans on the road less nervous. Then he put the car into gear and drove sedately down the hill. The road came out from under the trees and, after a few hundred yards, reached the outskirts of a middle-sized village. It had a familiar feel to it. It had been 11 years, but this place definitely rang a distant bell. "Is there a hospital around here?" he said. "Run by nuns?" Anathema shrugged. "I don't think so," she said. "The only large place is Tadfield Manor. I don't know what goes on there." "Divine planning," muttered Crowley under his breath. "And gears," said Anathema. "My bike didn't have gears. I'm sure my bike didn't have gears." Crowley leaned across to the angel. "Oh, Lord, heal this bike," he whispered sarcastically. "I'm sorry I just got carried away," hissed Aziraphale. "Tartan straps?" "Tartan is stylish." Crowley growled. On those occasions when the angel managed to get his mind into the 20th century, it always gravitated to 1950. "You can drop me off here," said Anathema, from the back seat. "Our pleasure," beamed the angel. As soon as the car had stopped, he had the back door open and was bowing like an aged retainer welcoming the young master back to the old plantation. Anathema gathered her things together and stepped out as haughtily as possible. She was quite sure neither of the two men had gone around to the back of the car, but the bike was unstrapped and leaning against the gate. There was definitely something very weird about them, she decided. Aziraphale bowed again. "So glad to have been of assistance," he said. "Thank you," said Anathema, icily. "Can we get on?" said Crowley. "Good night, miss. Get in, angel." Ah, well, that explained it. She had been perfectly safe after all. She watched the car disappear towards the center of the village and wheeled the bike up the path to the cottage. She hadn't bothered to lock it. She was sure that Agnes would have mentioned it if she was going to be burgled. She was always very good at personal things like that. She'd rented the cottage furnished, which meant that the actual furniture was the special sort you find in these circumstances, and had probably been left out for the dustman by the local war-on-one shop. It didn't matter. She didn't expect to be here long. If Agnes was right, she wouldn't be anywhere long, nor would anyone else. She spread her maps and things out on the ancient table under the kitchen's solitary light bulb. What had she learned? Nothing much, she decided. Probably it was the north end of the village, but she'd suspected that anyway. If you got too close, the signal swamped you. If you were too far away, you couldn't get an accurate fix. It was infuriating. The answer must be in the book somewhere. The trouble was that in order to understand the prediction, he had to be able to think like a half-crazed, highly intelligent 17th century witch with a mind like a crossword puzzle dictionary. Other members of the family had said that Agnes made things obscure to conceal them from the understanding of outsiders. And Athema, who suspected she could occasionally think like Agnes, had privately decided it was because Agnes was a bloody-minded old bitch with a mean sense of humor. She didn't have the book. And Athema stared in horror at the things on the table. The maps, the homemade divinatory theodolite, the thermos that had contained hot bovril, the torch, the rectangle of empty air where the prophecy should have been. She'd lost it. But that was ridiculous. One of the things Agnes was always very specific about was what happened to the book. She snatched up the torch and ran from the house. A feeling like the opposite of the feeling you're having when you say things like, "This feels spooky," said Aziraphale. That's what I mean. I never say things like, "This feels spooky," said Crowley. I'm all for spooky. A cherished feel, said Aziraphale desperately. Nope, can't sense a thing, said Crowley with forced jolliness. You're just oversensitive. It's my job, said Aziraphale. Angels can't be oversensitive. I expect people around here like living here, and you're just picking it up. Never picked up anything like this in London, said Aziraphale. There you are then, proves my point, said Crowley. And this is the place. I remember the stone lions on the gateposts. The Bentley's headlights lit up the groves of the overgrown rhododendrons that lined the drive. The tires crunched over gravel. It's a bit early in the morning to be calling on nuns, said Aziraphale doubtfully. Nonsense. Nuns are up and about at all hours, said Crowley. It's probably Compline, unless that's a slimming aid. Oh, cheap, very cheap, said the angel. There's really no need for that sort of thing. Don't get defensive. I told you. There were some of ours, black nuns. We needed a hospital closer to the airbase, you see. You've lost me there. You don't think American diplomats' wives usually give birth in little religious hospitals in the middle of nowhere, do you? It all had to seem to happen naturally. There's an airbase at Lower Tadfield. She went there for the opening. Things started to happen. Base hospital not ready. Our man there said, there's a place just down the road. And there we were. Rather a good organization. Except for one or two minor details, said Aziraphale smugly. But it nearly worked, snapped Crowley, feeling that he should stick up for the old firm. You see, evil always contains the seeds of its own destruction, said the angel. It is ultimately negative and therefore encompasses its downfall, even at its moments of apparent triumph. No matter how grandiose, how well planned, how apparently foolproof an evil plan, the inherent sinfulness will by definition rebound upon its instigators. No matter how apparently successful it may seem upon the way, at the end it will wreck itself. It will founder upon the rocks of iniquity and sink headfirst to vanish without trace into the seas of oblivion. Crowley considered this. Nah, he said at last. For my money, it was just average incompetence. Hey! He whistled under his breath. The gravelled forecourt in front of the manor was crowded with cars, and they weren't non-cars. The Bentley was, if anything, outclassed. A lot of the cars had GT or Turbo in their names, and phone aerials on their roofs. They were nearly all less than a year old. Crowley's hands itched. Aziraphale healed bicycles and broken bones. He longed to steal a few radios, let down some tires, that sort of thing. He resisted it. Well, well, he said. In my day, nuns were packed for a Morris traveler. This can't be right, said Aziraphale. Perhaps they've gone privates, said Crowley. Or you've got the wrong place. It's the right place, I tell you. Come on. They got out of the car. 30 seconds later, someone shot both of them, with incredible accuracy. If there was one thing that Mary Hodges, formerly loquacious, was good at, it was attempting to obey orders. She liked orders. They made the world a simpler place. What she wasn't good at was change. She'd really like the chattering order. She'd make friends for the first time. She'd had a room of her own for the first time. Of course, she knew that it was engaged in things which might, from certain viewpoints, be considered bad, but Mary Hodges had seen quite a lot of life in 30 years and had no illusions about what most of the human race had to do in order to make it from one week to the next. Besides, the food was good and you got to meet interesting people. The order, such as was left of it, had moved after the fire. After all, their sole purpose in existing had been fulfilled. They went their separate ways. She hadn't gone. She'd rather liked the manor, and, she said, so not to stay and see it was properly repaired. Because you couldn't trust workmen these days unless you were on top of them the whole time, in a manner of speaking. This meant breaking her vows. But Mother Superior said this was all right. Nothing to worry about. Breaking vows was perfectly okay in a black sisterhood. It would be all the same in 100 years' time, or rather 11 years' time. So if it gave her any pleasure, here were the deeds and an address to forward any mail unless it came in long brown envelopes with windows in the front. Then something very strange had happened to her. Left alone in the rambling building, working from one of the few undamaged rooms, arguing with men with cigarettes stuffed behind their ears and plaster dust on their trousers, and the kind of pocket calculator that comes up with a different answer to sums involved are in used notes, she discovered something she never knew existed. She discovered, under layers of silliness and eagerness to please, Mary Hodges. She found it quite easy to interpret builders' estimates and do VAT calculations. She'd got some books from the library and found finance to be both interesting and uncomplicated. She'd stopped reading the kind of women's magazine that talks about romance and knitting and started reading the kind of women's magazine that talks about orgasms. But apart from making a mental note to have one if ever the occasion presented itself, she dismissed them as only romance and knitting in a new form. So she'd started reading the kind of magazine that talked about mergers. After much thought, she'd bought a small home computer from an amused and uncondescending young dealer in Norton. After a crowded weekend, she took it back. Not, as he thought when she walked back into the shop, to have a plug put on it, but because it didn't have a 386 school processor. That bit he understood. He was a dealer, after all, and could understand quite long words. But after that, the conversation rapidly went downhill from his point of view. Mary Hodges produced yet more magazines. Most of them had the term PC somewhere in their title, and many of them had articles and reviews that she had circled carefully in red ink. She'd read about new women. She hadn't ever realized that she'd been an old woman, but after some thought she decided that titles like that were all one with the romance and the knitting and the orgasms, and the really important thing to be was yourself, just as hard as you could. She'd always been inclined to dress in black and white. All she needed to do was raise the hemlines, raise the heels, and leave off the wimple. It was while leafing through a magazine one day that she learned that, around the country, there was an apparently insatiable demand for commodious buildings and spacious grounds, run by people who understood the needs of the business community. The following day, she went out and ordered some stationery in the name of Tadfield Manor Conference and Management Training Center, reasoning that by the time it had been printed, she'd know all that was necessary to know about running such places. The ads went out the following week. It had turned out to be an overwhelming success because Mary Hodges realized early in her career as herself that management training didn't have to mean sitting people down in front of unreliable slide projectors. Firms expected far more than that these days. She provided it. Crowley sank down with his back against the statue. Aziraphale had already toppled backward into a rhododendron bush, a dark stain spreading across his coat. Crowley felt dampness suffusing his own shirt. This was ridiculous. The last time he needed now was to be killed. The last thing he needed now was to be killed. It would require all sorts of explanations. They didn't hand out new bodies just like that. They always wanted to know what you'd done with the new old one. It was like trying to get a new pen from a particularly bloody-minded stationery department. He looked at his hand in disbelief. Demons have to be able to see in the dark, and he could see that his hand was yellow. It was bleeding yellow. Gingerly, he tasted the finger. Then he crawled over to Aziraphale and checked the angel's shirt. If the stain on it was blood, something had gone very wrong with biology. "Ooh, that stung," moaned the fallen angel. "Got me right under the ribs." "Yes, but do you normally bleed blue?" said Crowley. Aziraphale's eyes opened. His right hand patted his chest. He sat up. He went through the same crude forensic self-examination as Crowley. Paint? He said. Crowley nodded. What are they playing at? Said the Aziraphale. I don't know, said Crowley, but I think it's called Silly Buggers. His tone suggested that he could play, too, and do it better. It was a game. It was tremendous fun. Nigel Tompkins, assistant head of purchasing, squirmed through the undergrowth, his mind aflame with some of the more memorable scenes of some of the better Clint Eastwood movies. And to think he believed that management training was going to be boring, too. There had been a lecture, but it had been about the paint guns and all the things you should never do with them, and Tompkins had looked at the fresh young faces of his rival trainees as, to a man, they resolved to do them all if there was half a chance of getting away with it. If people told you business was a jungle and then put a gun in your hand, then it was pretty obvious to Tompkins that they weren't expecting you to simply aim for the shirt. What it was all about was the corporate head hanging over your fireplace. Anyway, it was rumored that someone over in United Consolidated had done his promotion prospects a considerable amount of good by the anonymous application of high-speed earful of paint to an immediate superior, causing the latter to complain of little ringing noises in important meetings and eventually to be replaced on medical grounds. And there were his fellow trainees, fellow sperms, to switch metaphors, all struggling forward in the knowledge that there could only ever be one chairman of Industrial Holdings, PLC, and that the job would probably go to the biggest prick. Of course, some girl with a clipboard from personnel had told them that the courses they were going on were just to establish leadership potential, group cooperation, initiative, and so on. The trainees had tried to avoid one another's faces. It had worked quite well so far. The whitewater canoeing had taken care of Johnstone, punctured the eardrum, and the mountain climbing in Wales had done for Whittaker, groin strain. Tompkins thumbed another paint pellet into the gun and muttered business mantras to himself. Do unto others before they do unto you. Kill or be killed. Either shit or get out of the kitchen. Survival of the fittest. Make my day. He crawled a little nearer to the figures by the statue and didn't seem to have noticed him. When the available cover had run out, he took a deep breath and leapt to his feet. Okay, douchebabs, grab some scoey! Oh no! Where one of the figures had been, there was something dreadful. He blacked out. Crowley restored himself to his favorite shape. I hate having to do that, he murmured. I'm always afraid I'll forget how to change back, and it can ruin a good suit. I think the maggots were a bit over the top myself, said the Aziraphale. But without much rancor. Angel had certain moral standards to maintain, and so, unlike Crowley, he preferred to buy his clothes rather than wish them into being from raw firmament. And the shirt had been quite exquisite. I mean, just look at it, he said. I'll never get the stain out. Miracle at the Blaze, said Crowley, scanning the undergrowth for any more management trainees. Yes, but I'll always know the stain was there. You know, deep down, I mean, said the Angel. He picked up the gun and turned it over in his hands. I've never seen one of these before, he said. There was a pinging noise, and the statue beside him lost an ear. Let's not hang around, said Crowley. He wasn't alone. This is a very odd gun, you know. Very strange. I thought your side disapproved of guns, said Crowley. He took the gun from the Angel's plump hand and sighted along the stubby barrel. Current thinking favors them, said the Aziraphale. They lend weight to moral argument. In the right hands, of course. Yeah? Crowley snaked the hand over the metal. That's all right, then. Come on. He dropped the gun onto the recumbent form of Tompkins and marched away across the damp lawn. The front door of the manor was unlocked. The pair of them walked through unheeded. Some plump young men in army fatigues, spattered with paint, were drinking cocoa out of mugs in what had once been the sisters' refectory, and one or two of them gave them a cheery wave. Something like a hotel reception desk now occupied one end of the hall. It had a quietly competent look. Aziraphale gazed at the board and an aluminum easel beside it. In little plastic letters let into the black fabric of the board were the words, August 20th to the 21st. United Holdings PLC. Initiative Combat Course. Meanwhile, Crowley had picked up pamphlet from the desk. It showed glossy pictures of the mayor, with special references to its jacuzzis and indoor heated swimming pool. And on the back there was the sort of map that conference centers always have, which makes use of a careful misscaling to suggest that it is handy for every motorway exit in the nation, while carefully leaving out the labyrinth of country lanes that in fact surrounds it for miles on every side. Wrong place? Said the Zeraphale. No. Wrong time then. Yes. Crowley leafed through the booklet, in the hope of any clue. Perhaps it was too much to hope that the chattering order would still be here. After all, they'd done their bit. He hissed softly. Probably they'd gone to darkest America or somewhere, to convert the Christians, but he read on anyway. Sometimes the sort of leaflet had a little historical bit, because the kind of companies that hired places like this for a weekend of interactive personnel analysis or a conference on the strategic marketing dynamic liked to feel that they were strategically interacting in the very building. Give or take a couple of complete rebuildings, civil war, and 2 major fires, that some Elizabethan financier had endowed as a plague hospital. Not that he was actually expecting a sentence like, until 11 years ago the manor was used as a convent by an order of satanic nuns who weren't in fact all that good at it, really, but you never knew. A plump man wearing desert camouflage and holding a polystyrene cup of coffee wandered up to them. "Who's winning?" he said chummily. "Young Evanson of Forward Planning caught me a right zinger on the elbow, you know." "We're all gonna lose," said Crowley absently. There was a burst of firing from the grounds. Not the snap and zing of pellets, but the full-throated crackle of aerodynamically shaped bits of lead traveling extremely fast. There was an answering stutter. The redundant warriors stared at one another. A further burst took out a rather ugly Victorian stained glass window beside the door and stitched a row of holes in the plaster by Crowley's head. Aziraphale grabbed his arm. "What the hell is it?" he said. Crowley smiled like a snake. Oh, man. Let me just drink some water. Right, let us continue. Nigel Tompkins had come through with a wild headache and a vaguely empty space in his recent memory. He was not to know that the human brain, when faced with a sight too terrible to contemplate, is remarkably good at scabbing it over for forgetfulness. So he put it down to a pellet structure on the head. He was vaguely aware that his gun was somewhat heavier, but in his mildly bemused state he did not realize why until sometime after he'd pointed it at trainee manager Norman Weathered from internal audit and pulled the trigger. "I don't see why you're so shocked," said Crowley. "He wanted a real gun. Every desire in his head was for a real gun." "But you've turned him loose on all those unprotected people," said the Zeraphale. "Oh no," said Crowley. "Not exactly. Fair is fair." The contingent from financial planning were lying flat on their faces in what had once been the ha-ha, although they weren't very amused. "I always said you couldn't trust those people from purchasing," said the deputy financial management. "The bastards." A shot pinged off the wall above him. He crawled hurriedly over to the little group clustered around the fallen Weathered. "How does it look?" he said. The assistant head of wages turned a haggard face towards him. "Pretty bad," he said. "The bullet went through nearly all of them. Access, Barclay card, diners, the lot." "It was only the American Express Gold that stopped it," said Weathered. They looked in mute horror at the spectacle of a credit card wallet, a bullet hole nearly all the way through it. "Why'd they do it?" said a wages officer. The head of internal audit opened his mouth to say something reasonable, and didn't. Everyone had a point where they crack, and his head had just been hit with a spoon. 20 years in the job. He'd wanted to be a graphic designer, but the curious master hadn't heard of that. 20 years of double-checking form BF-18. 20 years of cranking the bloody hand calculator when even the people in forward planning had computers. And now, for reasons unknown, but possibly to do with reorganization and a desire to do away with all the expense of early retirement, they were shooting at him with bullets. The armies of paranoia marched behind his eyes. He looked down at his own gun. Through the mists of rage and bewilderment, he saw that it was bigger and blacker than it had been when it was issued to him. It felt heavier, too. He aimed it at a bush nearby and watched a stream of bullets blow it into oblivion. Oh, so that was their game. Well, someone had to win. He looked at his men. "Okay, guys," he said. "Let's get the bastards." "The way I see it," said Crowley, "no one has to pull the trigger." He gave Aziraphale a bright and brittle grin. "Come on," he said. "Let's have a look around while everyone's busy." Bullets streaked across the night. Jonathan Parker, purchasing section, was wriggling through the bushes when one of them put an arm around his neck. Nigel Tompkins spat a cluster of rhododendron leaves out of his mouth. "Down there it's company law," he hissed, through mud-encrusted features. "But up here it's me." "That was a pretty low trick," said Aziraphale, as they strode along the empty corridors. What'd I do?" said Crowley, pushing open doors at random. "There are people out there shooting one another." "Well, that's just it, isn't it? They're doing it themselves. It's what they really want to do. I just assisted them. Think of it as a microcosm of the universe. Free will for everyone. Ineffable, right?" Aziraphale glared. "Oh, all right," said Crowley wretchedly. "No one's actually going to be killed. They're all going to have miraculous escapes. It wouldn't be any fun otherwise." Aziraphale relaxed. "You know, Crowley," he said, beaming, "I've always said that. Deep down inside, you're really quite a—" All right, Crowley snapped. "Tell the whole blessed world, why don't you?" After a while, loose alliances began to emerge. Most of the financial departments found they had interests in common, settled their differences, and ganged up on forward planning. When the first police had arrived, 16 bullets from a variety of directions had hit it in the radiator before it had got halfway up the drive. 2 more took out its radio antenna, but they were too late. Too late. Mary Hodges was just putting the phone down when Crowley opened her office door. "It must be terrorists," she snapped. "Or poachers." She peered at the pair of them. "You're the police, aren't you?" she said. Crowley saw her eyes begin to widen. Like all demons, he had a good memory for faces. Even after 10 years, the loss of a wimple, and the addition of some rather severe makeup, he snapped his fingers. She settled back in her chair, her face becoming a blank and amiable mask. "There was no need for that," said Aziraphale. "Good." Crowley glanced at his watch. "Morning, ma'am," he said in a sing-song voice. "We're just a couple of supernatural entities, and we were just wondering if you might help us with the whereabouts of the notorious son of Satan." He smiled coldly at the angel. "I'll wake her up again, shall I? And you can say it." "Well, since you put it like that," said the angel slowly. "Sometimes the old ways are best," said Crowley. He turned to the impassive woman. "Were you a nun here 11 years ago?" he said. "Yes," said Mary. "There," said Crowley to Aziraphale. "See? I knew I wasn't wrong." "Luck of the devil," muttered the angel. "Your name then was Sister Talkative, or something." "Loquacious," said Mary Hodges in a hollow voice. "And do you recall an incident involving the switching of newborn babies?" said Crowley. Mary Hodges hesitated. When she did speak, it was as though memories that had been scabbed over were being stirred for the first time in years. "Yes," she said. "Is there any possibility that the switch could have gone wrong in some way?" "I do not know." Crowley thought for a bit. "You must have had—" "Records," he said. "There are always records. Everyone has records these days." He glanced proudly at Aziraphale. "It was one of my better ideas." "Oh, yes," said Mary Hodges. "And, where are they?" Said Aziraphale sweetly. "There was a fire just after the birth." Crowley groaned and threw his hands in the air. "That was Hastur, probably," he said. It's his style. Can you believe those guys? I bet he thought he was being really clever. Do you recall any details about the other child? Said Aziraphale. Yes. Please tell me. He had lovely little toesy woesies. Oh. And he was very sweet, said Mary Hodges wistfully. There was the sound of a siren outside, abruptly broken off as a bullet hit it. Aziraphale nudged Crowley. Gotta move on, he said. We're going to be knee-deep in police at any moment, and I will, of course, be morally obliged to assist them in their inquiries. He thought for a moment. Perhaps she can remember if there were any other women giving birth that night, and... There was the sound of running feet downstairs. Stop them, said Crowley. We need more time. Any more miracles and we'll really start getting noticed by up there, said the Aziraphale. If you really want Gabriel or someone wondering why 40 policemen have gone to sleep. Okay, said Crowley. That's it. It was worth a try. Let's get out of here. In 30 seconds you will wake up, said the Aziraphale to the entranced ex-nun, and you will have had a lovely dream about whatever you like best, and... Yes, fine, sighed Crowley. Now can we go? No one noticed them leaving. The police were too busy herding in 40 adrenaline-drunk fighting mad management trainees. 3 police vans had gouged tracks in the lawn, and Aziraphale made Crowley's backup for the first of the ambulances. But then the Bentley switched into the night. Behind them, the summer house and gazebo were already ablaze. We've really left that poor woman in a dreadful situation, said the angel. You think? Said Crowley, trying to hit a hedgehog and missing. Bookings will double, you mark my words. If she plays her cards right, sorts out the waivers, ties up all the legal bits, initiative training with real guns, they'll form queues. Why are you always so cynical? I said, because it's my job. They drove in silence for a while. Then Aziraphale said, You'd think he'd show up, wouldn't you? You'd think we could detect him in some way. He won't show up, not to us. Protective camouflage. He won't even know it, but his powers will keep him hidden from prying occult forces. Occult forces? You and me, explained Crowley. I'm not occult, said Aziraphale. Angels aren't occult, we're ethereal. Whatever, snapped Crowley, too worried to argue. Is there some other way of locating him? Crowley shrugged. Search me, he said. How much experience do you think I've got in these matters? Armageddon only happens once, you know. They don't let you go around again until you get it right. The angel stared out at the rushing hedgerows. It all seems so peaceful, he said. How do you think it will happen? Well, thermonuclear extinction has always been very popular. Although I must say the big boys are being quite polite to each other at the moment. Asteroid strike? Said the Aziraphale. Quite the fashion these days, I understand. Strike into the Indian Ocean, great big cloud of dust and vapor. Goodbye all higher life forms. Wow, said Crowley, taking care to exceed the speed limit. Every little helped. Doesn't bear thinking about it, does it? Said the Aziraphale gloomily. All the higher life forms sighed away, just like that. Terrible. Nothing but dust and fundamentalists. That was nasty. Sorry, couldn't resist it. They stared at the road. Maybe some terrorists? Aziraphale began. Not one of ours, said Crowley. Or ours, said Aziraphale. Although ours are freedom fighters, of course. I'll tell you what, said Crowley, scorching rubber on the Tadfield bypass. Cards on the table time. I'll tell you ours if you tell me yours. All right, you first. Oh no, you first. But you're a demon. Yes, but a demon of my word, I should hope. Aziraphale named 5 political leaders. Crowley named 6. 3 names appeared on both lists. See? Said Crowley. It's just like I've always said. They're cunning buggers, humans. You can't trust them an inch. But I don't think any of ours have any big plans afoot, said the Aziraphale. Just minor acts of their political unrest, he corrected. Ah, said Crowley bitterly. You mean none of this cheap mass-produced murder, just personal service, every bullet individually fired by skilled craftsmen? Aziraphale didn't rise to it. What are we gonna do now? Try and get some sleep. You don't need sleep. I don't need sleep. Evil never sleeps, and Witcher is ever vigilant. Evil in general, maybe. This specific part of it has got into the habit of getting its head down occasionally. He stared into the headlights. The time would come soon enough when sleep would be right out of the question. When those below found out that he personally had lost the Antichrist, they'd probably dig out all those reports he had done on the Spanish Inquisition and try them out on him, one at a time, and then all together. He rummaged in the glove compartment, fumbled the tape at random, and slotted it into the player. A little music would... Beelzebub had pulled the devil inside for me. For me. For me, murmured Crowley. His expression went blank for a moment, then gave a strange scream and reached at the on-off knob. Of course, we might be able to get a human to find him, said Aziraphale thoughtfully. What? Said Crowley distractedly. Humans are good at finding other humans. They've been doing it for thousands of years, and the child is human, as well as, you know. He would be hidden from us, but other humans might be able to, sense him perhaps? Or spot things we wouldn't think of. That wouldn't work. He's an Antichrist. It's got his, sort of, automatic defense, hasn't he? Even if he doesn't know it, it won't even let people suspect him. Not yet, not till it's ready. Suspicion will slide off him like whatever it is water slides off of, he finished lamely. Got any better ideas? Got one single better idea? Said Aziraphale. No. Right then. It could work. Don't tell me you haven't got any front organizations you could use. I know I have. We could see if they can pick up the trail. What could they do that we couldn't do? Well, for a start, they wouldn't get people to shoot one another. They wouldn't hypnotize a respectable woman. They... Okay, but it hasn't got a snowball's chance in hell. Believe me, I know. But I can't think of anything better. Crowley turned onto the motorway and headed for London. I have, a certain network of agents, said Aziraphale after a while, spread across the country. A disciplined force. I could set them searching. I, have something similar, Crowley admitted. You know how it is. You never know when they might come in handy. We'd better alert them. Do you think they ought to work together? Crowley shook his head. I don't think that would be a good idea, he said. They're not very, sophisticated, politically speaking. Then we'll each contact our own people and see what they can manage. Got to be worth a try, I suppose, said Crowley. It's not as if I haven't got lots of other work to do. God knows. His forehead creased for a moment, and then he slapped the steering wheel triumphantly. Ducks! He shouted. What? That's what the water slides off of. Aziraphale took a deep breath. Just drive the car, please, he said wearily. They drove back through the dawn, while the cassette player played J.S. Bach's Mass in B minor, vocals by Freddie Mercury. Crowley liked the city in the early mornings. Its population consisted almost entirely of people who had proper jobs to do and real reasons for being there, as opposed to the unnecessary millions who trailed in after 8 a.m., and the streets were more or less quiet. There were double yellow no parking lines in the narrow road outside Aziraphale's bookshop, but they obediently rolled back on themselves when the Bentley pulled into the curb. Well, okay, he said, as Aziraphale got to his coat from the back seat. We'll keep in touch, okay? What's this? Said Aziraphale, holding up a brown oblong. Crowley squinted at it. A book? He said. Not mine. Aziraphale turned a few of the yellowed pages. Tiny bibliophiliac bells rang in the back of his mind. It must have belonged to that young lady, he said slowly. We ought to have got her address. Look, I'm in enough trouble as it is. I don't want to get around about that I don't want it to get about that I go around returning people's property for them, said Crowley. Aziraphale reached the title page. It was probably a good job Crowley couldn't see his expression. I suppose you could always send it to the post office there, said Crowley, if you really feel you must. Address it to the mad woman with a bicycle. Never trust a woman who gives funny names to means of transport. Yes, certainly, said the angel. He fumbled for his keys, dropped them on the pavement, picked them up, dropped them again, and hurried to the shop door. We'll be in touch then, shall we? Crowley called after him. Aziraphale paused in the act of turning the key. What? He said, oh, yeah, fine, jolly good. And he slammed the door. Right, mumbled Crowley, suddenly feeling very alone. Torchlight flicked in the lanes. The trouble with trying to find a brown-covered book among brown leaves and brown water at the bottom of a ditch of brown earth in the brown, well, grayish light of dawn, was that you couldn't. It wasn't there. And Athema tried every method of search she could think of. There was the methodical quartering of the ground. There was the slapdash poking at the bracken by the roadside. There was the nonchalant sidling up to it and looking out to the side of her eye. She even tried the one which every romantic nerve in her body insisted should work, which consisted of theatrically giving up, sitting down, and letting her glance fall naturally on a patch of earth, which, if she had been in any decent narrative, should have contained the book. It didn't, which meant, as she had feared all along, that it was probably in the back of a car belonging to two consenting cycle repairmen. She could feel generations of Agnes Nutter's descendants laughing at her. Even if those two were honest enough to want to return it, they'd hardly go to all the trouble of finding a cottage they'd barely seen in the dark. The only hope was they wouldn't know what it was they got. End this chapter. And probably I should stop reading for today, because I have been reading for almost, it's 3.5 hours, which is, I think, quite enough of reading for a day, out loud at least. We are a quarter of the way through the book, which means that we can do this tomorrow and get to halfway, and then next week we finish it. So that this will be fine, yeah. I think that is a fairly good plan to me. Yes. Well, still a little sick, yeah. Gotta make sure to not lose my voice again, so that we can do Paranorma Site on Thursday and all that, and keep reading too. I don't want to go skipping streams again and all that. I like not skipping streams. It's terrible to skip streams. I die inside. For that is like one of the two things that keeps me sane in life. Okay. Okay, I'll be right back in a little while, and I'll switch to the game of today. We still have a game to play, by the way. Shadow Gambit. We'll play that for a couple of hours probably, and then we'll stop there, I suppose. So I'll be right back.